Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
I can't believe that such a young person is really as highly qualified as the references and diploma say. I am confused about your age. The future boss repeated this phrase several times in the last hour. The dialogue could have been called an interview, but it was more like an interrogation. Sitting at the oak table, a man in his 40s had already asked about 1,000 questions. He was not interested in simple, unambiguous answers. Max was interested in details. It seemed that he knew more about the girl than she knew at the moment when she crossed the threshold of the office and timidly said hello. Employers cared about all, even the smallest details of her life. Where and at what faculty she studied full-time or part-time, what grades she got, and whether the teachers appreciated the girl. The man clarified and wrote down in the diary the names of all the relatives Christina could name. He found out where she already worked and for what reasons she was fired, and also her attitude to pets and vaccinations. The only thing the man really didn't care about: references from past jobs. He stated that the former employer could write anything he wanted on the paper and not even have to thank him for it. It was just a paper that would not determine whether Christina would get a position as a caregiver or be left with nothing again. However, the man scrutinized the documents and then put them in a folder, pushed them aside, and looked at her carefully in the eyes. "Better tell me, beautiful child. Why were you fired from your last job?" His gaze expressed complete distrust towards the girl. With every word, he wanted to catch her in a lie or point out her disreputable behavior. Christina sat across from this gullible man on the leather couch and wondered if she should continue the interview at all. She felt as if she were not applying for a position as a nurse for a sick old lady, but as if she were about to become an ambassador who would have access to state secrets. In spite of everything, neither fatigue nor the desire to get home and take a hot bath, Christina held herself with dignity. She politely answered her future employer's numerous questions and showed him impeccable patience and restraint. As a rule, this is how they want to see a person who will have to care for an elderly woman with a strong character. It is possible to understand employers in such a case. It is nice to realize that the nurse at the moment when her ward will show caprices and refuse to eat, will not put a pot on the head of an insane babka and will not knock on it to the colonels, but will only smile and continue with entreaties and tales to feed her from a spoon. For Christina, this kind of activity was not new. She had previously had the honor of watching over the elderly parents of wealthy people. Despite the fact that each of her wards was with its own complex character and certain requirements, today's potential boss pissed the girl off. And this despite the fact that in the first minutes Christina even experienced a slight sympathy for him. Max was really handsome, muscular body, swarthy skin, rough masculine chin, and full lips. All of this couldn't help but attract the girl's attention. Looking into his eyes, she seemed to drown. They were blacker than night, and surely ruined a large number of representatives of the opposite sex. It was enough only once to look at him, and it became clear that the girl disappeared. Even under his jacket, his broad shoulders, powerful arms, and muscles were noticeable. "Really, you're right," Christina couldn't stand it. "I'm really too young for such a high qualification." The girl began to rise slowly from the sofa. "I think we will come back to this conversation in 10 years. Then I will be old enough to meet your expectations." Christina in no way expected to hear his commanding tone. Max said loudly, "Sit down." Despite the fact that he was still not considered the girl's superior and had no right to raise his voice at her, she didn't dare disobey. There was something in his voice. What made Christina obey? She instantly sat back down on the couch and thought about the fact that with that kind of grip, he could command an army instead of casting sit-ins for his elderly mother. He looked the girl straight in the eye and said, "Do you really think I'm asking stupid questions?" Max swept the hall with his impossible eyes. It was quite difficult to bear their gaze. The girl did not want to lie. She wished to remain extremely honest with him, but she could not, and slowly said, "I suppose you have good reasons for that. I don't think it's out of idle curiosity. My mom's coming to stay with me for 3 months. She just got out of rehab, so she won't be able to stay home alone. She'll need a lot of attention and your patience. To be honest with you, she's not the best temperament." Max was silent for a few minutes. Then he turned to the window and thought hard. He continued as if he were talking to himself. "We haven't spent time together for a long time. My mother has been separated for over a year. Ever since her second husband died. I'd like to spend as much time with her as possible. But my profession requires full commitment. If I stop devoting time to work, I'll have to support my mother and fulfill her whims. I simply won't have the financial ability." His eyes were full of coldness. When Max took his gaze away from the window and looked at Christina again. "And believe me, if I have to ask stupid questions for hours just to find the right person, I will do it." At this point, the girl had the very plausible opinion that Max was used to torturing those willing to work for him. But he had found a nurse who was not timid. This girl would never let anyone treat her like this. She knew what humiliation and disrespect were, and so she had made a promise to herself that she would never let anyone feel that way about her. The girl grew up in an orphanage. She was an orphan and had no idea who her parents were. The educator told that mom and dad loved their daughter very much, but they had to fly far away to a star. It was from there that they watched Christina and were proud of her. Frankly speaking, there was nothing to be proud of especially. The girl from time to time attended classes at the university and changed one job for another. The only thing she was really good at was taking care of the elderly. They reached out to her and were ready to fulfill any requirements of doctors, but only under Christina's constant supervision. Several of her charges had already died. They were too old and learned. It fell to the girl to watch over them before they died. Christina was confident that she would easily find a common language with Max's mother. That is why, as soon as the information about the vacancy arrived, she, without hesitation, went to the interview. But now her patience was wearing thin. "Excuse me, Max," calmly said the girl, addressing the failed employer. "I'm sorry I'm not the right person for your mother's care. I can't waste any more time answering your many questions. I can't take another couple hours. It's not worth wasting your time. Not yours, not mine." With these words, the girl quickly got up from the couch. I can imagine what a beating she will get from the head of the agency, who gave excellent recommendations and sent her here. Lucy would have easily sent a more experienced and qualified girl to this position, but she gave her a chance. She repeatedly told Christina that she saw potential in her and wanted to help her realize it by all means. But Christina once again failed to live up to the expectations of her older comrade. It is very good to be beautiful, but only if you do not plan to get a servant in a rich house as a nanny, maid, nurse, or housekeeper. And for those who are going to get such a position, beauty becomes an incredible disadvantage. Potential employers are weeded out during the interview process. Rich men treat such girls with great enthusiasm. But the bigger it is, the higher the risk that their wives will definitely refuse to hire them. It is better to be a middle-aged gray mouse from an intelligent family. Young and not-so-gray girls are not in fashion today. And to this, Max Lucy directed Christina not only because she wanted to help, he is lonely. And therefore, when hired, no beautiful lady will not sit next to her and give valuable advice. The decision on whether the girl would follow his mother would be made only by Max. But there was no point in pondering about it anymore. The girl had missed another chance to get a job. The only consolation for Christina was that she understood why Max was lonely. Anyone would just run away from him to the ends of the earth. Because living with a bore is a difficult enough ordeal, and even good looks and a piercing gaze can't change that. Christina quickly left the territory of the mansion and sat down in a cab. Sadly, she thought about the fact that such luxury will have to forget about it if she can't find a job in the near future. She would even have to give up taking buses and walk. She was in no hurry to tell Lucy that she had failed. That news would have to wait until tomorrow. Besides, no one was kicking her out. Christina left the rich house on her own. The girl was already near her own house when a message came on her phone. Max wrote that she was hired and already tomorrow she could arrive by 9 o'clock. She had to go through the registration procedure and receive detailed instructions. The boss's mother should arrive the day after tomorrow. She entered the mansion at 8:55. An earlier arrival would mean that Christina had voluntarily condemned herself to languish in front of her employer's office, showing undue interest. Being late would be even worse. Max would hardly want to deal with an unpunctual person who does not know how to calculate her own time. These are not qualities that would be worth mentioning in a resume and showing the boss on the first day to come 5 minutes early. Ideal solution. This period of time is enough time to gather your thoughts and put yourself in order if the need arises. Christina's experience in attending job interviews was so rich that she could write a book on how to behave properly to get a job. But she didn't use her knowledge herself for some reason. The door to Max's office was open, for better or worse. Whenever Christina had to knock on a closed door, she felt inexplicably awkward and could not cope with the feeling. Asking the question would do the trick. She was always terrified to hear an angry voice from behind the door, informing her that it was busy or that she had to close the door immediately. This is exactly what the teachers in the orphanage where the girl grew up did. It affected her fragile psyche and took its toll. It was noticeable that Max did not like to waste time. Despite the early hour, work was in full swing. And if in large companies by 9 o'clock employees only come to work and spend another hour to drink coffee with colleagues and wake up. In Max's case, it was different. It seemed that the work in his office never stopped. Since yesterday, from behind the door could be heard thundering and rolling of his voice. He was giving orders, at the same time pointing out mistakes and explaining what they led to. Most likely it was a telephone conversation, because there was no one in the office except Max. Christina realized that it was 8:59 on the clock. She should show herself on the doorstep of the office and draw attention to herself. Let Max see that she was not late, but arrived exactly at the appointed time. However, as soon as the girl made a step towards the door, she heard a woman's voice, and it came from the office. "Max, Bunny, are you wrong now?" From what she heard, the girl froze in shock, least of all Max. A stone impenetrable wall. He looked like a bunny, unless he was hiding in his closet or under his desk. Another Max. On autopilot, Christina took another short step and glanced fleetingly through the open door. No, there were two of them. A supervisor sat behind a desk, opening and closing a ballpoint pen. And next to him stood a tall, beautiful girl in a strong business suit. "You know how long it took me to get this contract for us." The pretty girl in the skirts seemed to be indignant. She waved a pile of some papers in front of Max's face. "Now what? Now you turn your nose up. I agree. These guys may not be perfect, but who can boast of that quality?" Christina's greatest wish at this moment was to turn invisible. The scene, which she witnessed quite by accident, was clearly not meant for unauthorized viewers. The intimate bunny alone was worth what? The girl had the feeling that she had stumbled into someone else's bedroom without knocking and caught the couple in the middle of a not-so-applicable activity. Actually, it was their own fault. You shouldn't leave the door open. Anyone passing by here could quite unwittingly become a spectator of what was going on. Christina backed away from the office door, farther away, turned the corner, and took a breath. This morning, going to a new job, she did not plan to become a witness to an incomprehensible scene. The girl still couldn't decide what she had just seen. Whether it was a conflict of interest at work, or a quarrel between two lovers, or all together. Christina felt sincere joy not only from the fact that she had remained unnoticed, but also for the reason that her ward would arrive at her son's house only tomorrow. Old people tend to appear unexpectedly and at the most inopportune moment. And then, as if nothing had happened, to interfere in what is happening and give out valuable advice. If Max's mother were here right now, she'd probably ask, "What are you doing here? Nice ladies hiding from your boss or eavesdropping on these?" Christina immediately imagined this picture and a couple of faces from the office that would immediately turn in her direction and make such an expression that Christina involuntarily wanted to fall under the ground. Try to tell and prove to anyone that it wasn't espionage, but a simple coincidence. No, she'd rather let what she'd seen and heard be her own little secret. The couple in the study were talking so loudly that the voices carried even into the hallway. However, it was hard to understand what they were talking about. Only one thing was clear: Max spoke in a calm, cold voice, and his interlocutor was constantly snapping and could not control her own emotions. "You're acting like an idiot. My bunny. Only a fool can afford to refuse such a lucrative offer." There was a rustling of papers. It was clear that the businesswoman was again showing him the papers lying on the table, considering it a weighty proof of her own rightness. Time was passing, and the hand of the watch, which was worn on Christina's wrist, came to the very top. However, the unfamiliar girl from Max's office did not even think to end either her monologue or not the most successful dialogue in her life. Christina didn't really want to interfere in a conversation filled with bunnies and goofs, but she realized that Max might think that the girl was late today, and therefore would be late all the time. Today it was especially important for the new caregiver to make a good impression on her boss. What was that involved? The girl didn't know yet, but she didn't see it as a big deal. He was just an employer, on whose decision depended whether she would get the job and the salary or not. At exactly 9 o'clock, Christina heard the voice of her boss. He clearly said that the meeting was over and would continue next time. Max explained to his interlocutor that now he had an important meeting, and therefore the person in the strong suit would have to leave his office. Most likely, the man had already gone to the door. Christina could make out every word he said. She could not believe her happiness. The boss turned out to be punctual, so what if he was a bore? This too has its advantages. However, the girl continued to bend her line. "All you have to do is sign the papers. Come on, you fool, sign it. And we'll make the evening just for the two of us." It's like she's stretching her words on purpose. "I've already told you firmly no, this deal is off. And besides, I'm very busy tonight." The girl, resentfully muttering something under her nose, flew out of the office and ran past Christina. Despite her speed, she managed to run her gaze distractedly over her. Only when she had already flown across the hall did she stop and quickly turn around. From the outside, it seemed that the information the stylish lady had gotten while running had just reached her brain. The business lady gave Christina a hard stare. No one even tried to hide dislike and surprise. The new nurse did not pretend not to notice the interest in her, but even nodded to her boss's business partner as a sign of greeting. She was particularly interested in who could afford to call Max a bunny and a fool at the same time. Christina assumed that they would often have to run into each other within the walls of this house, and therefore it was better to prepare for these meetings. The boss's supposed girlfriend looked dignified. The first thought that crossed Christina's mind was the realization that this is a rather expensive person. It would hardly look luxurious now, shower her with gold and diamonds. A strict suit sat perfectly on her slender figure, and stiletto-heeled loafers emphasized the beauty and length of her legs. The small jewelry would have gone completely unnoticed, but it emitted such a bright glow that it seemed to outshine the light of the lamps. Looking at her sleek black hair, Christina suddenly remembered the warlike Indians. The girl was very pretty, but not very friendly. She did not think of answering Christina's greeting. The business lady's face remained impassive and fearless. Just as abruptly as she had just stopped, the girl turned around and slammed the door loudly. Despite the fact that the appearance of this one especially had perfect upbringing was absent there. Christina could tell that as a professional nanny or caregiver. Never. A man who solves business issues by acquiring bunnies shouldn't get his nose above his own head. Christina's musings were interrupted by the voice of her boss. "Come in, my dear young lady." It was a pity that he saw her. It would have been much easier if Max didn't know that someone had unwittingly witnessed his conversation with the business lady. One good thing. He now knows that the nurse came strictly at the appointed time, not late and disrespectful. On the sea to life. Max watched carefully as Christina entered the office and took a seat on the couch. Looking at his face, it was hard to imagine that just a minute ago passions were raging here. He seemed indifferent, unperturbed, cold, and powerful, trying not to give away the shyness that had appeared from some unknown source. Christina said hello. Max answered her and pointed to the table that stood near his desk. He waited patiently for the girl to get up from the couch and move closer. "Max spoke before you, and I signed the documents. I would like to make it clear, if you even once again allow yourself to get up and walk out without listening to me to the end, Like you did in the interview, we're gonna have to break up. I'm the only one making the decision here. When will this conversation be over? That's understandable. He looked her straight in the eye without hesitation. Christina realized she wasn't mistaken. Her boss was not only a terrible bore, but also a tyrant. She realized that no position, even the most prestigious one, was worth it if someone could afford to talk like that. Better to walk and starve. She was about to open her mouth to say all the thoughts that were whirling through her head. But when she looked into his eyes, she could only shyly apologize. Max nodded approvingly, signaling that the subject was closed, and just as coldly, offered again to discuss all the terms of cooperation. The man listed the responsibilities of the caregiver and named the amount of monthly payments he would receive. Christina takes care of his mother. The sum exceeded any expectations of the girl. She tried her best to hide her unexpected joy. It would look unseemly and certainly unprofessional. Max would hardly be pleased. Finding out that his mother's new caregiver had once slaved for pennies, Christina quickly put a neat little signature on the proposed documents. An attentive person could recognize a lot from the handwriting for what it was. She was completely at ease. Smooth, neat lines could only give away the girl's poise, collectedness, and integrity. Well, now it was time to familiarize himself with Helen's schedule. For the first time ever, a note of uncertainty and doubt slipped into his intonation. Why it happened became clear in a few seconds. A heavy folder appeared on the table in front of Christina. Max offered to familiarize himself with the papers and allowed to ask questions if necessary. Frankly speaking, the girl was afraid to seem overly curious. After she had received the first beating from her boss, she decided that she would just read everything she was given and do without another dialogue. But she couldn't fulfill the promise she'd made to herself. When she opened the first sheet, she immediately raised her head and looked at her boss with surprised eyes. "Your mother speaks Chinese. Do not be surprised, Christina. It was promising in the years of her youth and the profession obliged. But today it's hard enough for her to give up her old habits. Now more than half the world speaks the language, and she doesn't want to be left behind. Don't worry, you can talk to her in English. All you have to do is take her to a tutor." Christina went back to reading, and as she turned the pages, she felt more and more pity for her ward. Her day was scheduled almost minute by minute. The girl's introduction. Old age is when you sit in a rocking chair by the plate, watch TV, and occasionally solve crossword puzzles, and not spend the only free minutes to say goodbye to one teacher and get to the next. The girl's imagination had already painted the face of a sad old woman who was being forced to attend classes to keep her sanity. However, she had no idea what an active woman she was to meet. Helen was burning with the desire to live and could not imagine that she would sit at home and watch Malakov's show on TV. While Christina was carefully reading all the documents that were in the folder, Max was silently watching her. It seemed that he was trying to read the girl's thoughts and look into her soul. The man nodded impatiently with his pencil and the desk top of his desk. Once the girl had read everything that was presented to her, she decided that she could make her own point. "Do you really think all this is necessary for a woman of her age who has undergone a major operation?" The pencil with which he was beating out the rhythm flew sharply to the other side of the table. He looked at Christina with an annihilating look and said, "Her daughter needs this." Christina and her new boss went to meet Helen at the airport. The car was driven, of course, not by Max, but by his driver, a mature, respectable man who seemed to be fused to the steering wheel and paid no attention to anything but what was happening on the road. Max's mother was returning today from a clinic in Germany. There she had undergone heart surgery and spent several weeks in rehab. As soon as Max got in the car and buckled up, he was instantly engrossed in his laptop and completely immersed in his work. He wasn't interested in how long their drive was or if they would make it in time for the plane to arrive. All the most important things were happening on his computer right now. Looking at the expression on his face, Christina decided that her boss was checking the morning mail or solving a problem of incredible proportions. However, she did not rule out the possibility that he might be corresponding with the person who had loudly called him a fool and an idiot yesterday morning. Max was so fascinated by what was happening on the other side of the screen that he never once took his eyes off it. He continued to work while they sat in the waiting room at the airport. The computer was turned off only when the arrival of the flight on which his mother was arriving was announced, and the hall began to fill up, with people waiting and meeting. Then the man finally turned off his laptop and put it in his bag. His cold face trembled and moved as the doors began to open and the passengers of the arriving flight appeared in the hall. Christina could not believe her eyes. Could this unapproachable man of stone really smile? She carefully followed his gaze and saw that a rather busy couple appeared on the horizon. A pumped-up man in dorm mooring jeans, which seemed to tear from the slightest movement, and a girl in a t-shirt with a smiling kitten drawn on it. Following them came a wheelchair. There was no doubt who sat in it. Black eyes shone half a face the same as Max's. Christina correctly assumed it was her boss's mother. And in front of her walked her daughter and her boyfriend. "Son," the woman shouted loudly, finding Max with her eyes. She even seemed to be bouncing in her chair with impatience. It must be said that she loved her son very much, and he reciprocated. There was an invisible bond between them, which is rarely preserved between children and parents. "Who is that with her?" Christina asked. She wanted to see if her hunch was correct or if she was wrong. "That's my little sister Maria." Cervantes is always looking for adventure, not only for herself, but also for others. That's why Mom has such a busy schedule. Maria is sure that if you just let her relax, Mom will go crazy and will bore everyone with her moralizing and simple boring. Max answered the new caregiver's question exhaustively. Christina noted that the phrase about boring was just right. By the way, if this quality was possessed by Helen's son, I see from whom it was passed on. Meanwhile, Helen said something angrily to her son-in-law. The expression on her face accurately conveyed any emotion. Therefore, it was easy to guess that the woman was angry. However, the man didn't even turn a deaf ear. He continued to walk confidently toward his lover's brother. Angry at the lack of attention, Helen pulled something from her pocket that looked distantly like a remote control. She easily pressed the button and smiled. It didn't take long for the people around her to react. The suitcase that Alex, Max's sister's boyfriend, was carrying started to move. It vibrated and shook, bouncing, snapping. It was as if inside it had just come to life. Something big and strong. Or something. From surprise, people scrambled from the side, looking around in confusion and just in case, trying to get away from the suspicious suitcase, and at the same time from the man who was carrying it. The strong, muscular man frowned and looked at his mother-in-law with a slight reproach. There's a reason they say old people are like children. Alex and Max looked at each other quickly and nodded satisfactorily. It seemed that only Christina did not understand what was happening and where she had gotten to. Someone from among the passengers and greeters loudly shouted terrorists, and panic left the whole hall. Some called the police. Others grabbed the children in their arms and rushed to the exit. 2 policemen on duty were rushing towards Alex. On the way, they even forgot their breakfast and grabbed the holster quite in the side of the neck. Calmly, in a loud voice, said Alex. To be honest, his voice, thick bass, which would be envied by the most famous opera singer, was clearly not intended to inspire calmness and confidence in the surrounding. As expected, the panic only grew larger around the man with the suitcase. Abruptly, an empty space was formed. In the hall where the people from the airplane had just entered. It was hard to imagine such a thing. People were trying to run as far away as possible, and those who had not yet had time to leave the plane crowded at the doors and caused the formation of a real jam. Those who had already entered the hall, expectations with horror rolled backwards, and the rear ones, not understanding what was happening and why they were not allowed into the hall, on the contrary, strived forward. It seemed that only a second had passed, but Helen was not next to Alex. She could be in danger because the woman was in a wheelchair and could not stand up for herself. However, Max was surprisingly calm. Everything seemed to be going according to his plan, and he was even enjoying himself. The man did his best to keep an indifferent expression on his face, but the corners of his lips treacherously turned upward. It was enough to realize that what was happening in the hall gave him incredible pleasure. His eyes were filled with pride. Yes, it was pride. Christina shook her head fearfully, trying to push away the thought that her new boss was not only a bore and a tyrant, but also a madman. "Where is your mother, Max?" Christina tried her best to shout out the crowd in the waiting room and draw attention to herself. But her boss didn't even turn a deaf ear. Of course, a stone wall would not pay attention to a mere nurse. Meanwhile, the situation with the suitcase, inside of which seemed to live something big, stronger, and more frequent, developed quite rapidly. Realizing that in order to calm the crowd, the only thing left to do was to open the suitcase and show the contents to those around him. Alex did exactly that, and it didn't bother him at all that his mother-in-law's power of attorney had disappeared somewhere. He lowered the bag on the floor and only touched the lock, as everyone heard a hysterical scream. The man didn't pay any attention to those around him. He just pulled the zipper. And that's when the suitcase on the floor really exploded. Multicolored things flew out of it: dresses and sweaters, handkerchiefs and plates. Expensive clothes bought by Helen during the whole time of her stay in Germany. It should be noted that before the scheduled surgery, she had the opportunity not only to visit expensive brand stores, but also to buy things from the latest collections of famous designers. Her son never spared money for his mother and always fulfilled any of her whims. A turquoise Panama, bought in one of the boutiques, landed neatly on Alex's head. It was neatly laid on the square bald head, which made Alex immediately seem to be a short-sighted and slightly ill man. The man stared at the arriving policeman. One was trying to pull a lacy blouse off his shoulder. The second one helped, and both law enforcement officials strained to see who was the culprit behind their ridiculous appearance. At the bottom of the suitcase on the floor was a toy excavator. The device not only imitated the sounds of real construction equipment, but also rhythmically lowered and raised the bucket. It seemed that such a joke was worthy of a 5-year-old child. But no, it was organized by a grown woman who only a few weeks ago managed to avoid a heart attack. At that moment, an unfamiliar voice sounded very close. But Christina immediately realized who it belonged to. Helen drove up in her chair quite briskly. "Well, hello, son." Max bent down to give his mother a hug, a kiss. She guided his neck with beautiful manicured hands. If Christina hadn't seen the woman's face, she would have easily declared that the hands belonged to a well-groomed young girl. On the ring finger of her right hand was a thin gold ring, most likely a wedding band. On her left hand, the woman had a neat white gold bracelet. And on her finger, Christina noticed a diamond ring. The man was so happy to see his mother that he was ready to pick her up in his arms and hold her close to him. But the wheelchair prevented him from doing so. Helen snuggled into the neck of her own son and pronounced, "I missed you very much. I really missed you." Looking at this touching scene, Christina deep down envied both Max and his mother a lot. She had never received any affection or love. She didn't remember her mother. And the teachers of the orphanage did not have enough time or mental resources. Max muttered quietly that he missed his mother too. And his new employee stood next to him and could not believe that her boss was capable of affection and tenderness. It turns out that it's not always a stone wall. That's how Christina began to call her new boss. Can only speak with a cold voice full of ice and gnashing metal. It was amazing to hear the softness and warmth coming from Max's lips. He was completely different from the man who yesterday morning had spoken haughtily to Christina in his office and reprimanded her for allowing herself to stop the interview without his approval. The mask of arrogance quickly fell away with the appearance of the mother. It took its toll on the nurse. Like a blow under the breath, Max smiled genuinely at Helen, and therefore looked several years younger. Christina figured he must be even less than 30. Earlier, when his expression remained cold and haughty, and when his eyes shone with incredible self-confidence, Max looked much older. It gave him a great deal of importance. Now that there was no one else to demonstrate it, it turned out that this man was not just attractive, but damn handsome. The nurse couldn't literally take her eyes off him. She liked literally everything about his swarthy cheekbones, his dimpled chin, his powerful neck, which seemed to be tight in the collar of his shirt. The girl had the urge to undo a few buttons and stroke the mark left on his skin by the stiff fabric. And then she would rise up on her toes and gently touch his lips with hers. So full and firm, she timidly raised her eyes and met his eyes. Big, moist, black ones that inspired fear in them. Christina felt as if she had been hit with ice water. She couldn't believe that all those thoughts that rushed through her head in a hurricane were her own. The remnants of sanity. It was the suitcase situation that decided her. She imagined what she would have to endure while working with Helen. And if she had the nerve to make a childish spectacle of herself in the waiting room of an international airport, just to make her own son smile. Christina turned away abruptly, in the back of her mind berating herself for letting her own brain shut down. She's a mere nanny to his elderly mother, just a caregiver. He's a Stonewall, a rich man willing to pay for her labor just for that. He'll have a whole bunch of them, and each one will be ready to look into the mouth of her handsome boss. And for love and everything else, he has a business lady in a strict suit. Her condition. The girl wrote it off as mild stress and a momentary freak out. "How are you feeling, my sweet mom?" In a gentle voice, Max asked, "I think your prank is a direct confirmation of your full recovery. Or didn't you know how to show off the outfits you bought?" The man laughed loudly and his mother laughed back. For a moment, while they were busy with each other, Christina allowed herself to calm down and cool down. And only then did she allow herself to turn around. Mother and son kept their identical black eyes on each other. The whole world seemed to cease to exist for the two of them. And only the new nurse had the opportunity to watch this touching scene as long as she wanted. They were alike, and it wasn't just the eyes. Max had a high forehead and a flat nose and a stubborn chin, all of which he had inherited from his own mother. Even someone who was not distinguished by special knowledge, the gnomish physicist would easily determine that no one in the sight of this couple should hope for pardon. It was then that Christina realized that the fabulous salary that Max had been assigned was not all that great. While Max and his mother were enjoying each other's company, Maria and Alex were busy packing, scattered all over the room. As soon as the suitcase was closed, Alex led away for questioning the people, who until a few minutes ago were thrashing around the hall in search of shelter, again began to walk measuredly and leisurely from corner to corner. Some were waiting for the arrival of the next flight, others, on the contrary, a short time before the departure of their own airplane. The only reminder that recently there was panic and chaos in the hall was Panama, which Alex did not put away in his suitcase, but put on Maria's head. Finally, Max took his eyes off his own mother and turned his attention to Christina. He pointed his finger at her and said, "Meet Christina. This is Christina, your nurse. As long as you live in my house, this girl will accompany you everywhere and help you with anything you need." Helen took her time, turned her neatly tucked head toward Christina, smiled sweetly, and slowly reached out. "But hello, Christina." The tone, the way he spoke. The voice was eerily familiar to the girl, and the look in those big black eyes. Now there would be two of them, young and old. And somehow it seemed that the old woman would be much more trouble than her son. If Christina had not seen with her own eyes the picture of which Helen had become the artist, the girl would have been sure that she was incredibly lucky to have a job. From the outside, her mentee appeared to be the embodiment of charm, elegance, and grace. But beneath the appearance of an elderly angel lurked the nature of a real devil. It should not be forgotten that her son, under every whim and every prank of his mother, did not react in any way except his own smile and loud laughter. One could conclude that the antics that had paralyzed the airport today were in the order of the day with this pair of accomplices. Not even a second passed while these thoughts flashed through Christina's mind. She had time to think about everything in the world, while Helen turned her face from the nurse to her son. "My sweetheart, you said I look healthy, didn't you?" In response to his mother's questions, Max nodded affirmatively. "So explain it to me. A healthy woman is full of vigor. What did you hire this beautiful girl for?" She was the one he didn't tolerate any objections. She seemed to demand an exhaustive answer to her question immediately. "Do you really have a nurse? You strong, healthy man has a nurse who follows you around and gives you a spoon or a piece of toilet paper." At this point, Max artistically coughed, trying to suppress another fit of laughter. I'll be honest with you, sweet mom, that I don't have a caregiver. It was hard to say that the son was being honest with his own mother. Surely she knew nothing about the business lady who was still loudly deciding business matters in Max's office yesterday morning. Then I'll ask you another question that is especially important to me. Why do I need to be strong, strong, strong? And most importantly, healthy. I need a nurse. The phrase sounded triumphant, and Helen gave Christina a glare. This woman had an ironclad logic. At times, she reminded Christina of a 5-year-old child. The prospect of working in this family seemed less and less bright by the minute. Aren't we having breakfast together today? My darling. Helen sat in the chair and tugged her son's pant leg, trying to get his attention. Yes, Mommy, of course. We will definitely spend time together, but only after I get home from work. I'm sorry, I have a lot of errands, meetings, negotiations scheduled for today. So you'll have breakfast with Maria and Christina, and maybe Alex, if his domestic orderlies will let you go after your prank. Max laughed again, but quickly pulled himself together. Work. Helen stretched out in a disappointed voice and sighed heavily. Her eyes childishly filled with tears and her lower lip moved forward involuntarily. For a moment, Christina felt funny, but she held back, and Helen did too. She just shook her head angrily. Mom, you realize I can't give up my business and stay home with you. Then we'd have nothing to eat, and we'd have to sell that adorable hat. He smiled slightly and pointed to the Panama, in which Maria was still standing. The girl was at a loss. She was anxious to meet her mother's new nurse. But she was more worried about the young man who had promised to marry her yesterday. And today he'd been taken away by the police to testify. Give me your word of honor that you'll spend dinner with your family, the woman said flatly. I promise I'll be home, and I won't say a word about work tonight or tomorrow morning. And I'm at your disposal. Sweet Maman, Max theatrically bowed to his mother. Well, that means we'll have to entertain Christina without you. She gave the nurse a thoughtful look. That didn't sound good. Something told Christina that only one of their small group would be having fun. Nevertheless, the girl leaned over her ward and, trying to seem attractive and friendly, said, Hello, Helen. I am very glad to meet you. I don't think we'll be bored. I wasn't going to be bored. The nice woman replied and smiled that strange smile that inspired the people around her. A quiet horror. Christina felt a chill run down her spine. If earlier she had thought that adult and elderly women spent their leisure time in cultural institutions or at home, then today, after the joke of her ward, realized that she was deeply mistaken. It was possible that she would come up with something new, equally fun. And most likely, that activity would not be on the list Max had provided her. As Christina, Helen, and Max approached the car, everyone suddenly remembered Maria and her lovers. The boss's mother was already sitting in the car, and the driver was stowing the chair in the trunk, when the woman asked in a completely innocent voice what had happened to Alex and if he would go with them. Quietly enough so his sister wouldn't hear. But clearly Max said that he was a grown man and would solve his problems on his own. He, meaning Max, would not be involved in any way. Men always disliked each other and treated each other with a kind of jealousy. Max was not happy about the fact that his sister favored this not-soon-jump-in-tight jeans. Besides, Alex was constantly on the lookout for himself, and his sister regularly borrowed money from him. Alex did not like Maria's mother very much either. She preferred to see next to her daughter someone like her own son, as masculine and handsome, with business acumen and flair. They are circus performers who were kicked out of the arena. That's why the object of Helen's jokes and mockery was regularly Alex and not anyone else. Why are you doing this, Max? Christina was somewhat indignant. She did not know all the subtleties of relations within the family, and therefore felt indignation. The boss only looked at Christina with cold eyes, and the girl realized that she was facing a stone wall again. The effect of Mom's joke was over. Unbelievable. His mother is putting on a circus on the grounds of the international airport. But he only laughs and not a word of reproach in her direction. Alex, the injured party, will have to deal with what happened. He was just unlucky to carry that damn suitcase. Christina realized that she would not stay in this place for long. As soon as Max thought that she was not a professional, and he had his own scale of criteria for evaluation, the boss would put her out on the street with no severance pay. The three of them drove home Helen, Max, and Christina. Maria stayed at the airport to rescue Alex, who seemed to be tortured at the police station. Max drove the car by himself. Where had the driver gone? No one but the chief knew, and Christina didn't bother to ask. She realized that asking unnecessary questions while staying in this family was strictly forbidden. Helen seemed to have turned into a child again. She suddenly laughed and began to talk about how the suitcase in Alex's hands had burst. No, you heard it all at once. And oh, where to run, what to do. I'll tell Lisa today. She'll laugh. And Lisa, the maid at Max's house who'd been working for him for over 10 years. She was a grown woman who had become a member of the family. Her boss liked her a lot, executive, responsible, never asks too many questions and gets things done quickly, and had become friends with his mother. Helen seemed particularly pleased with herself right now, and Christina's boss liked that. He was one of those kids who did everything possible and impossible to please their elderly parents. They usually feel that every second of life can be the last. Therefore, let it be filled with joy and fun. Phew, but I did it for something. It turned out that Max is not as hopeless as it seems at first glance. He asked questions without taking his eyes off the road. Max, what did I do? I mean, the backhoe turned on. I'm sure it was Maria who put the toy in my suitcase by accident. I found the remote control in my jacket pocket. To be honest, I mistook it for the one that came with my chair. You know, the doctor said that if I get tired, I can change the position under my elbow or pillows near my neck. Helen quickly turned the conversation to another topic, hoping that her son would be quickly distracted, concerned about his own mother's comfort and convenience. Max, however, was relentless. He continued to ask his mother leading questions and enjoyed watching her try to extricate herself from the situation. Helen, anxious, thrashed in her chair. Once again, she reminded Christina of a child who had given birth and was now trying to get away with it. Okay, son, I'm sorry. I just really missed you. All right. I'll apologize too. The mother realized that there was no point in trying to get away with it anymore, so she admitted her own guilt. But it didn't upset her in the slightest. Tell me, please, were you fed on the plane? The doctor told me that you need to eat by the hour and be sure to take the prescribed medication. Max realized that it was time to end the conversation with the circus performance, so he turned to the questions that really bothered him. Yes, son, they served fish, which, as you know, I can't stand. The obliging stewardess tried her best to feed me, but when she realized it was useless, she put my portion in a box and made sure I picked it up on the way off the plane. Helen's story was fascinating. She seemed to like the attention of others and was making a maximal effort to keep it as long as possible. It's okay, we'll get there. And I'll be sure to feed Zeus. Finished the monologue with the boss's mom. Christina had yet to meet Zeus. The big Caucasian sheepdog lived in the backyard in an aviary, and at night it was kept on the whole territory of the mansion, warning the owner in case of danger. The dog had lived with the owner since the house was built and had become a member of the family. If something had happened to Zeus, Max wouldn't have survived it. The company, consisting of the mother's son and her newfound nurse, reached home quickly enough and without any adventures. This especially pleased Christina, who had not yet had time to come to her senses after what she had seen at the airport. Helen, tired from the long flight and emotions, dozed off in the car. "We are home, Mom," solemnly declared Max, stopping the car at the gate. "Really?" Helen said, waking up. It hadn't even been 6 months. She demanded to be taken out of the car immediately and said that she would walk home. She's full of energy and completely healthy. And this chair was invented by the doctors to make her, and Helen believed that age is a judgment, and that the surgery she has undergone prohibits her from enjoying life and doing what she wants to do. On the way home, the mother walked leaning on her son. Helen looked like the ultimate conspirator and said she was going to show him her greatest treasure. "Mom, let's have your finds. Will you share with Christina?" I have no doubt that another diamond necklace with emeralds will be a splurge. Look with the dress that you showed in the morning to a good half of the waiting room. Now I'm really in a terrible hurry." Max tried with all his might to turn his mother's attention to Christina. Helen did not even turn her head in the direction of the nurse. It was a secret that concerned only her and her son. "I will appreciate your fine tonight. I swear to you," Max promised. Helen nodded contentedly and entered the house on her own, letting go of her son's hand. She held the lady's purse tightly in her hands. It was there that something of particular value to the woman was kept. Christina was visited by a feeling of slight envy. She always wanted a beautiful life, but the luxury for the girl was traveling by cab instead of streetcar or bus. One thing she did have, however. This piece of jewelry had no price. Her mother's earring, which was found near the crash site. The other one was never found, most likely burned with the body. Christina received the treasure on the day of her majority. The earrings were kept in the safe of the director of the orphanage, and the girl did not even suspect what gift the educators had prepared for her. The girl has always been on a good account. She did not enter into conflicts and always went towards helping everyone who needed it. "I hope you two will find common ground," grinned Max and returned to the car. Christina tried to assure him that she would find a common language with her mother, but she realized that it would be difficult and would take a long time. If someone asked the girl to make a rating of the most dangerous professions, the first on the list would be the position of a caregiver. Before meeting Helen, Christina was convinced that the ideal nanny for an elderly woman. However, Lady Perfection has failed. To please the new ward turned out to be quite difficult. If at the airport and in the car the woman was cheerful and actively participated in conversations, then it was worth it to cross the threshold of the house, as she became an exact copy of her son in the image of a stone wall. The woman silently drank a glass of water, drinking the prescribed medicine, demanded help to disassemble the suitcases, and stated that she wanted to stay alone. But no sooner had Christina left her ward's room than the door opened and Lisa, Max's housekeeper, appeared on the threshold. She seemed to Christina rather stern and not talkative, but not in Helen's company. The women, like two good old friends, hugged for a long time and even cried. After hugs, Lisa said that she was preparing a festive dinner and would be happy to see Lenotchka in her place of honor. Christina suggested to her ward to go downstairs and have something to eat. She remembered the morning conversation and realized that the woman still hadn't eaten. Helen, however, waved her head negatively and settled down on the bed. She defiantly turned away from Christina, and the girl, who had experience with such individuals, took a seat in the corner on a chair and opened a book lying on the table. The first thing that caught my eye, not the title written in Chinese, but the bookmark. An old photograph served for that purpose. On it, as Christina guessed, was Helen, and standing next to it were Max and Maria. So there had to be another child in this family. Strange, why hadn't he or she come to the airport to meet their mom? Christina would have given everything she owned in this world just to see her parents. She was so engrossed in the photo shoot that she started to look at the smallest details. Even then, Helen dressed beautifully and made sure that the children were neat and back. But the young and attractive woman had a light dress and a buildable fabric. It pulled her belly in nicely, drawing attention to it. Maria was dressed in a sundress and two long braids with white bows tied at the sides. Max, dressed in shorts and a shirt, even then looked like a real man who could be trusted with the whole world. The girl did not notice how the time flew by. She was immersed in her own memories and tears came to her eyes. Christina did not notice how loud the sobs knew and woke Helen. She was looking at the girl curiously and didn't understand why the new nurse seemed so familiar. Christina, on the other hand, looking at the details, recognized the earrings, a similar piece. She kept it carefully in the pocket of her purse, and on her birthday, she made sure to wear it when she was alone. Christina did not like noisy companies, and therefore, every year she bought a bottle of champagne and a cake, and celebrated the holiday alone. She took out the most elegant dress, did her hair, and put on her mother's earring, despite the fact that she never managed to get acquainted with her own parents. The girl never tired of thanking them for the gift of life and sharing news and achievements. The girl understood that in those days it was very difficult to get beautiful jewelry. But she could not call this situation other than a coincidence. She wanted to ask Helen where the earrings had come from and whether she still had them, but she remembered that no one in this family liked unnecessary questions. Christina shuddered at the touch that brought the girl back to reality. Helen woke up. She slowly got out of bed and approached Christina. The woman didn't understand why the girl was so interested in the old photo. Yes, there were times when they were happy as a family. Back then, Helen, a young and beautiful mother of two, was waiting for the arrival of her youngest daughter. She and Greg, Father Max, were happy. Doctors said that after the birth of Maria, Helen was unlikely to be able to carry a baby again. But they were wrong. Returning from vacation, Helen complained more and more often of feeling unwell, nausea, and dizziness. But after a visit to the gynecologist, everything fell into place. She was given one of the most satisfying diagnoses ever. She will soon be a mom again. In gratitude for this joyful news, Greg presented his wife with a pair of exclusive earrings. There were simply no analogs of such a product. He personally drew a sketch and gave it to an acquaintance of the jeweler. Not everyone could afford such luxury. That evening, the couple left the children with a nanny. They sometimes invited a neighbor to look after Max and the little one, and went to the movies themselves. Helen and Greg were happy to know that they would soon be young parents again. Their financial situation and social status allowed them to raise another baby. 9 months flew by like a blink of an eye. Helen gave birth to a healthy, strong baby girl who looked like her father. It was decided not to take the older children to the discharge from the maternity hospital. Greg personally drove the car, and Helen held the baby girl in her arms. She didn't bother to buckle up. It was uncomfortable and hot. And her husband always drove the vehicle carefully. But not that day. The car skidded on a bend. It turned over several times and caught fire. Emergency personnel arrived on the scene and found the little girl requiring long-term treatment, while EMTs tried to get her parents out of the burning car. Helen and Greg spent a long time in intensive care, and there was practically no chance to save them. The doctors made a disappointing diagnosis, and therefore it was decided to transfer the girl, who miraculously managed to survive, to a baby home. The older children spent all this time with relatives. And when Helen and Greg came to their senses, they were informed that the little girl had died. The hospital staff decided that the young couple would have too much money to spend on their own recovery, and they had 2 more children on their necks. One of the nurses who was on call that day found an earring near the burned-out car, a rare piece of white gold jewelry. The honest girl handed the treasure to the workers of the baby home, where the girl was given, and asked it to be sure to pass the jewelry to her owner. After the child grows up, for the luck of the pupil in that orphanage worked teachers from God. When the girl reached adulthood, she was presented with an amazing gift, greetings from Mom and Dad from the other side of the world. Helen and Greg long experienced the bitterness of loss. Not only did they spend more than a year in hospitals and clinics, it took them even more time with psychologists. Helen's husband blamed himself for the accident that killed their newborn daughter. Helen tried with all her might to convince her husband that he was wrong. After 5 years of agony, Greg died. His heart could not withstand the constant pricking of his conscience. Dying, the father, who had lost his daughter, said that he was going to her, and the older children were left in the care of their mother. Despite the fact that more than 20 years had passed since that terrible accident, Helen remembered everything that had happened to them. She regularly went to the cemetery where her daughter and husband were buried, bringing flowers and toys. When her son announced that Helen was going to Germany for surgery, the woman was outraged and she couldn't leave just yet. Her dead daughter's birthday was coming up and Helen was bound to visit her grave and talk to the little girl. Max assured his mother that he would drive himself to the cemetery and take whatever his mother said. Frankly, he thought it was time to stop taking what had happened 20 years ago so seriously. Helen arrived in Germany a few days early. She had expressed a desire to go shopping in malls and furniture stores. Her son's financial situation allowed her to buy anything she liked. During one of the shopping trips, Helen stumbled upon an antique shop quite by accident. Her son loved antiques, and the woman knew how to make him feel good. She was perusing the display cases and racks when she saw earrings on one of the shelves. The woman immediately forgot about gifts for her son and began to think about what kind of dress she could wear with this or that set. Her attention was attracted by a single piece of jewelry. When Helen took a closer look, her whole life seemed to flash before her eyes. She immediately remembered the day when Greg, her late husband, had given her earrings based on a unique design. She remembered the accident and her husband's agony. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Please tell me, where is the second earring? I would like to buy this set." She turned to the seller of the antique shop. "This earring is sold alone for more than 10 years, lying on the counter, and does not cause anyone's interest. Can you imagine? Everyone wants a set. It is understandable." The seller was genuinely surprised that someone was interested in this product. The earring was brought to the store many years ago by a woman. She did not know the history of this product. She only said that she had found it on the street and wanted to get some money. Since then, the white gold earring with a small scattering of diamonds lay on the counter and did not arouse interest among customers until Helen stepped over the threshold. At that moment, she was ready to give any money just to buy what was once rightfully hers. It seemed that this purchase would give her back a piece of the past, bring back memories of those days when they were all happy, when she had her little girl in her arms and knew that Papa, her older brother, and sister were waiting for them eagerly at home. It was about this discovery Helen had been so eager to tell her own son, the businessman, and that man. And now when she woke up to find her new caregiver, Christina, scrutinizing photos of the family and crying bitterly. "What's the matter? Baby, did a picture of my whole family happy upset you so much?" Helen asked politely. "Hugging a girl?" Christina not only didn't expect her ward to wake up so unexpectedly, but also didn't think that the woman would take part and ask what was the reason for her sudden tears. No one had ever been so polite to the girl. She could no longer hold back her emotions. The girl cried and told everything that had happened to her in her short but so bitter life. The girl knew that, most likely, after such an act, the owner would ask her to leave her post as a caregiver. But she could not help herself. Tears rolled from her eyes without stopping. She told Helen that she had grown up in an orphanage and had not known parental love and affection, that she had had to work from an early age to make ends meet, and now she had to look after other people's parents to earn her bread. She regretted very much that she had never seen her own father and mother. Helen clasped the girl tightly to her breast and whispered, "Well, will you be good to cry? We all have a hard life." And then Helen began to tell her story. When she reached that period of her life, when she experienced the joy of motherhood for the third time, the woman could not resist and cried too. She decided that she could open up to this bright, defenseless girl. Helen opened her handbag and took out an earring. "Look, it's from my past. My late husband gave me the earrings for giving him a daughter. She died in a terrible accident, and her husband died a few years later, couldn't bear the loss a few weeks ago. I saw this earring by chance in a store overseas. I know I can't be wrong. This set was one of a kind and unmatched. My husband made them especially for me." Christina listened to the story of this amazing woman and could not believe her own ears. Was it really true? The girl slowly stood up and walked to her bag. Helen looked questioningly at her nurse and did not understand what was going on. Didn't understand exactly until the girl pulled out the exact same earring. The set was connected. Both of them stood in the middle of the room and looked at each other, not understanding what was going on. No, both Christina and Helen made a logical connection in their heads, but couldn't believe that this was really happening to them. And it's not a dream. "My daughter, my sweet girl. All these years I've mourned you and carried toys and presents to the cemetery. And you're here, alive and well," cried Helen, hugging and kissing the one she wanted to send away 2 hours ago, just to convince her son that she didn't need a nurse. They spent the entire afternoon like that. When Max got home, he was concerned as to why his mother still hadn't gone downstairs, and handed out directions to anyone who would come across her path. The man went up to the second floor and froze in front of the bedroom door that was meant for Helen. He heard someone crying in the room, and without even waiting for someone to answer his knock, he entered abruptly. The man was genuinely surprised to see his mother. The strong and unapproachable woman was sitting on the bed next to Christina, a simple nurse who had been hired for the job only yesterday. It was hard to imagine that someone could melt her heart in such a short period of time. "Mom, what's going on here?" "Christina, please explain to me why a woman who's just had surgery is in a state of hysteria. You were tasked with keeping her calm and happy, and you are completely failing in your duties." The stone wall spoke, and there was no way to stop it. Max was angry and preparing to fire the caregiver he had just hired. "No severance pay. Christina, you can pack up and leave this house. You're fired." He said those words in his usual cold voice. There was no trace of the man who had laughed at his mother's stupid jokes that morning. "Max, stop. First, let us explain to you everything that happened. And then we'll see if you can fire someone or take it back." Helen's voice sounded equally harsh and cold, and so the son simply froze. The first thing the woman in Serbia showed him was a picture of Helen's mom standing exactly in them. The son knew the story that once long ago his father had given his mother a unique gift. Few people in those days could please their spouses with exclusive white gold earrings. He also knew that those earrings had been irretrievably lost during the terrible fire in which their little sister had died. And now, when he saw them in his mother's hands, the man was speechless. He couldn't believe his own eyes and didn't want to believe his own ears. Until his mother told him that she had found the second earring in one of the stores. Max was sure that Christina had simply made up the story. But there was nothing to reproach her for. Everything really did match up. Could it be that this girl, who as recently as yesterday morning had returned tail and allowed herself to assert her own point of view, had turned out to be his own sister? The girl who years ago, they all believed, had died in a car accident. The man's eyes filled with tears. He let his feelings come out, hugged Christina, and asked for her forgiveness. He had no idea what to say in such situations, so he simply apologized. He felt guilty for speaking rudely to Christina during the interview and at the airport. Max realized he had become completely confused. "My favorite girls, pull yourselves together. We are waiting for a wonderful holiday dinner, prepared and Lisa." Imagine her hysterics if she finds out that Helen suddenly has a grown-up daughter. Max laughed. He hugged his mom and sister and motioned for them to come downstairs. As they opened the door, they heard Alex and Maria enter the house. "Let's not say anything to them yet. Let Maria show her sister what she can do." Max laughed and winked at his mother. "Don't worry, no one will give you offense in this house. But I must say that your sister is a very spoiled person. She doesn't tolerate competition, and she's used to having all the attention in this family," Helen warned. She still couldn't believe that this was happening to her, that the daughter she had mourned and thought dead for over 20 years was alive and standing next to her. There were hysterical screams coming from the first floor. Maria was sharing the events of the day. It turns out that Alex had spent all that time in the police station. He was proving to the law enforcement representatives that he had nothing to do with terrorist organizations, and what happened was just a stupid joke. His future mother-in-laws. Maria met Alex a few years ago. Then her mother insisted that Max paid for her sister's trip to a foreign camp. The girl was going through a breakup with her first love and badly needed positive emotions. Her son did not argue with Helen, but simply gave as much money as was needed to pay for the vacation and flight. Maria had a wonderful 2 weeks there, enjoying socializing with her peers and being under the close supervision of psychologists. To the surprise of the family, Maria did not pull any tricks, but she surprised everyone by the fact that after arriving home, she continued to communicate with one of the same vacationers. His name was Alex. His parents sent the boy on vacation after a hard study. Returning from the camp in France, Alex soon appeared on the doorstep of the house where Maria lived and said that he could not live without her. To say that the relatives were dumbfounded, nothing to say. Even Maria was in a slight shock. However, the young people made a promise not to do anything stupid and kept it for several years. Between them, more and more often began to talk about marriage. And a few months ago, Alex introduced Maria to his parents. They spent 2 weeks in France, from where they flew to Germany and returned with Helen. It was hard to explain why Maria and Max's mother didn't take this man seriously. His appearance truly resembled that of a clown. When Helen decided to pull a prank at the airport, she had no idea where it would lead. Maybe it was for the best. Let the guy learn to get out of difficult situations on his own. Especially since life together with her daughter is a series of difficult situations and endless adventures. Alex spent the whole day today to explain to the police in broken English that he is a good French citizen who came to visit his fiancée's family. The difficulty was that Maria was not allowed into the office until she had legal status. Spouses have no right to take part in investigations and proceedings. However, it was money that helped them cope with the difficulties. Thanks to her brother, Maria never needed it. No, she didn't sit on her brother's neck. Maria held a decent position in his company, and it should be noted, reached this position. Not through family connections, but only through her own knowledge and skills. Max always reprimanded her severely in meetings. If the occasion arose, but also honestly praised her for her professional accomplishments. The only indulgence that the boss allowed himself to regularly please his sister was a salary an order of magnitude higher than that of her colleagues. This topic was off limits for discussion in the office. The employees knew that Max did not tolerate gossip. The man was always ready for open conversations and boldly responded to any complaints from the employees. If he noticed that someone was whispering in the corners, he always called for a conversation, which was usually followed by dismissal. When the passion downstairs had subsided, Christina and Helen went down to the first floor. "Hello, mine," never waning. The mother said wryly to Maria, "Do you have any idea what Ali Imam had to go through? Why did you make this circus? Explain it to me, please." Max intervened in the conversation. He really liked the prank, and although he treated Alex respectfully, he didn't try to hide the fact that Mom came up with a funny prank. Everyone understood that for such a joke, a French citizen could be deported to his country without the right to return. Then Maria would have become the wife of a French Decembrist. Surely his sister would have boarded the first plane to Paris and sought a date with a persistent troublemaker. These thoughts made Max laugh. He laughed loudly, which caused astonishment among the others, and hurried to share his thoughts. After everyone had laughed quite a bit, Maria asked a very appropriate question. Since when would a simple caregiver sit at the table with them and listen to them indulge in family memories? Indeed, every dinner with the family, Max, Maria, and Helen was filled with warm conversations about their father, their childhood, and their family traditions. The children, as Helen used to call them, told her their secrets, and she, in turn, made a surprised face and made them believe that until now, she did not even suspect what had happened. Helen was in no hurry to please Maria with the fact that she had a younger sister, despite the fact that she had grown up a spoiled girl. She was kind and sympathetic at heart, and always responded warmly to her mother's requests to visit her sister's grave in the cemetery. When asked why Christina was given a seat at the table, her mother replied that she could get dizzy and had to get used to having someone there to support her and help her, but she was satisfied with that explanation. Despite the insulting grimace on her face towards Christina, she softened nonetheless. The girls assigned a seat next to Alex, who, despite the joke organized by Helen, arrived for dinner with a gorgeous bouquet of flowers for his future mother-in-law. He was still wearing 2 tight jeans. What caused another fit of laughter when he appeared on the doorstep? It seemed that today's surprises had come to an end, but it wasn't. The front door swung open, and the one who had swept past Christina yesterday and given her a less than welcoming look appeared on the doorstep. She seemed to have come straight from a business meeting. In another strict suit, styled hair, stilettos, and an unchanged file folder in hand. "Good evening. I'm sorry, I didn't realize Max had nice guests. We were supposed to spend the evening together, and especially frozen on the threshold because no one invited her into the house. And what's more, there were no dishes for her at the table." What was especially unlike Max, if he invited someone to visit, he was always zealous to make sure that the guest was comfortable. He didn't seem to care about the businesswoman's comfort at all. "Jenna, I think I've made it clear to you that I'm busy tonight." Max said these words in such a cold voice that Christina felt horror, just like the day of the interview. However, the whole situation brought joy to Helen and Max. Looking into his mother's eyes, let her enjoy talking to the unexpected guest. "Well, what are you, son?" heaping a girl on the doorstep. "Come in, dear Jenna. Visitors are always welcome in our home. Affectionately." "What was that?" Completely out of character for a mother, Helen said. She looked like a rainbow hostess now, ready to feed anyone. But Jenna had no idea what a dangerous trap she had fallen into quite willingly. "Meet Maria, my daughter Alex, and her boyfriend." "Well, Max, you know, Christina." Helen did not have time to finish, as she saw on Jenna's face irritation and contempt. The girl immediately reported that she could not stand it when servants sit at the same table with the owners. She compared such behavior with the situation when an ordinary employee took part in important negotiations on an equal footing with the boss. By the way, Jenna was that ordinary employee. She brewed not the most delicious coffee and brought Max papers to sign. She got her position only because of her long legs and the beautiful, even smile of Max's partner. Solid men like to be greeted by a friendly girl. The tired, tortured secretary who had served the company since its inception and was the boss's right-hand woman. Helen, realizing that a stone had been thrown into the vegetable garden, her newfound daughter decided to remind the florist that she was just a simple rank-and-file employee who had just broken into a board meeting and was trying to take an active part. But the girl didn't even seem to pay attention to the remark. She was engrossed in trying to draw Max's attention to herself. Those sitting at the table suddenly looked at each other and laughed loudly. Everyone remembered the incident at the airport. Jenna sat, not realizing what was going on, and just drank water, courteously served, and Lisa, on the girl's luck, the housekeeper, brought dinner. And the family was somewhat distracted by the tweaking of the guest. When everyone was fed and satisfied, Alex asked permission to speak. Helen realized that something was about to transpire that she still wasn't ready to hear. Indeed, the young man confessed that he had loved her daughter for a very long time and wished Maria to become his lawfully wedded wife. He immediately hastened to assure the members of his new family that he had no intention of taking the girl to France. Alex applied for citizenship and even found a permanent job. A large company was actively looking for a professional, experienced programmer and was ready to pay decent money for Alex's knowledge. Maria cried from joy and surprise. She did not even suspect that her boyfriend was coming to USA not just for fun, but with the most serious intentions. The girl responded by agreeing to the marriage proposal and began to accept congratulations. At that moment, she allowed Christina to hug herself. If the mother has penetrated trust to this person, then she has nothing to share with the nurse. Jenna also allowed herself to make a congratulatory speech. The girl decided to take the initiative in her own hands and told those gathered at the table that she and Max were in a close enough relationship and could also announce the wedding. At that moment, you should have just seen Max's face. His eyes turned cold and angry. "Well, my son proposed to you, but he didn't tell me anything," Helen asked snidely. This person's statement did not cause her any emotion except laughter. The woman realized that her son was an intelligent and responsible man who could pay attention to a person like Jenna. Only in one single instance, she had never been a prude and realized that it would be better to have a temporary relationship with such a doll than a year of loneliness. Maria jumped with laughter. She realized that after what Jenna had said, she would only have to pack her things from her desk and leave the company's walls forever. Christina also realized that. She was ashamed of herself, but the girl was even happy about this outcome. She did not like this businesswoman even before she ran into her in the lobby. Only Alex was indifferent to this story. He did not understand Russian speech well and laughed only because his future spouse did. Max got up from the table, approached Jenna, and sharply pushed her chair away. "I'll see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock. In my office with a letter of resignation. I made no promises about our marriage. There's no need to mislead my family. They might think I'm crazy for deciding to commit my life to you." The girl blushed and, trying to object to what she heard, was quickly dispensed with. She didn't even say goodbye, jumped out of the house, slammed the door of her own car. It was heard how sharply she moved. "Will there be any more news?" Maria burst into laughter and couldn't stop. Helen said slowly, "Today, this news struck me to the core." Her voice a few minutes ago joyful suddenly became serious. "Mom, something happened in my heart. The operation didn't go well. What's the matter?" She wouldn't have survived if anything bad had happened to her mother. No, my girl is fine." Helen hurried to reassure her daughter. She asked everyone present to just listen carefully to the story the mother wanted to tell her children. When she started the story about how all the family was eagerly waiting for the birth of their sister, Maria exhaled. She was ready to listen to the story as many times as she wanted, knowing that her mother was okay. So Lisa brought a large pot of tea and joined the large family. She had long since become a full member of the family, but she never allowed herself to sit down at the table with everyone else. Only after dinner was served and the kitchen was in order, she made her favorite tea and let herself indulge in memories, along with everyone else. Helen spoke at length today, and with a special feeling, everyone at the table had tears running down their cheeks. It seemed that even Alex, who could hardly perceive Russian speech, was penetrated by the story. And there were quiet sobs. When the mother got to the point where she discovered an earring given by her father in a store in Germany, she cried. Christina allowed herself to intervene and continue the story, which caused Maria's surprise. Only Max seemed to remain calm. In his heart, he was uncontrollably glad that the girl for whom so many tears had been shed was alive and well. She had come to their house on her own. One should thank fate and God for that. Christina began her story, and not everyone could understand how it related to what Helen had just told. Couldn't understand until it was about the Serbs. The girl pulled 2 earrings out of the purse she had thoughtfully brought with her. It was them, the ones her mother had been looking at for a long time in the picture. Max had once suggested that she order the exact same ones from a jeweler. Helen flatly refused. She said she didn't plan to enter the same river twice. It was a memory of her father, and let it remain his memory forever. Then the son bought his mother an extraordinarily beautiful set of exactly that ring. This morning, Christina noticed the ward on her hand. Upon realizing what was happening, Maria cried, unashamed of her tears, and hugged Christina tightly. Through her tears, she laughed and stated that it was a good thing they didn't have time to socialize. She has a terrible temper, and now she would have to apologize for any rudeness for sure. Now she would only have to apologize for the fact that all this time none of them had known that she was the youngest and most beloved sister alive. The evening seemed to be endless. When the tea was finished, the whole family moved to the floor of the fireplace. The children surrounded their mother and had long conversations about what their lives had been like. Christina told much about her past. It was already Maria and Max. They were tormented by guilt that their sister didn't have everything she owned. As the time passed midnight, Helen declared that she was immensely tired for today. Even though she felt strong and healthy after the surgery, such a shock was not easy to bear. She went to bed and insisted that Christina would definitely spend that night in her bedroom. The girl promised that as soon as they got ready for bed, she would come to her mother's room. Alex also apologized and withdrew. He had not just endured a hard flight, but was having a hard time getting used to the time difference. No one dared to take offense at him. Maria and Max wanted to spend time alone with their sister. Max hugged his sisters and suggested to celebrate such an event with a glass of champagne. It was a real miracle, which happens only once in a lifetime. And then not everyone. Sitting at the table, they began to discuss the future. That Christina was moving into her brother's house. It was agreed without reservation. Then there was the question of who would take care of Mom. She needed a nurse again, a girl who had just found a family. She dreamed of it all her life. She declared that she wasn't going to quit her hard-won position. She and her brother laughed and told Maria about how hard it was to get an interview. Max's. They sat at the table in the kitchen for a long time, sipping champagne and making plans for the future. None of them so happy did not know that in the morning, when they woke up, life would not be the same. None of them suspected that the mother who had just found her dead daughter would not be able to stand such happiness. When Helen stated that she was tired and wished to go to bed, she was not lying. The woman was indeed feeling exhausted. Moreover, Her heart ached again, but Chisa did not want to spoil the children's joy of the family reunion. She reached the bedroom, sat down on the bed, and passed out. Helen didn't have time to take the pill that could have saved her life. The children discovered the body in the early hours of the morning, as they were escorting Christina to her new bedroom. No one knew that the next day a hurt Jenna would go to the police and file a report that Max had been molesting her regularly. No one knew the cops would come for Alex too. Money doesn't always solve problems. The case of the explosion at the international airport will not be so easy to solve. But all this will happen only tomorrow, when the new day comes. And today, these three were so happy, sitting at the kitchen table, drinking champagne, and could not believe that after 20 years their family was reunited. Max and Maria believed that the father had helped the children find each other. Before he died, he announced that he was going in search of his dead daughter. When the bottle of delicious French drink was drunk, the young people hugged each other tightly and decided to walk their sister to the bedroom in friendship.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Kathy was born and raised in a rural family. Her mother worked on the farm all her life. Her father worked as a driver. Kathy and her sister Christina rustled around the house from a small age, cleaning, cooking, tending to the livestock. Parents didn't have time. They earned money. They came home tired in the evening, and their daughters looked after them. They would set the table, pour tea, and carry clean towels after washing. It was the order of the day then. Kathy dreamed of being a teacher from childhood. Perhaps her first teacher played a big part in that. It was a beautiful, very intelligent young girl, barely graduated from the institute. She spoke competently and calmly, knew the answers to all questions, and skillfully motivated the class to successful study. She had no laggards. Even the weakest tried and stretched to please Mrs. Anna. Kathy remembered crying when her favorite teacher's practice was over and she went home. She hadn't been the only one upset. Since then, the girl had firmly decided that when she grew up, she would become a teacher, as good and kind as Ms. Anna. So Kathy never changed her mind. She studied well and, having finished school, easily entered the university. Life in the city began to get strange. That Meadows, a room in the dormitory. It was so unusual. The girl had never been separated from her parents and sister Christina for longer than a couple of days. And here it was all of a sudden. It was scary and hard at first, but Kathy quickly got used to it. She liked her studies, her classmates, her teachers. The girl realized more and more clearly. She had chosen the right path. Being a teacher is really her calling. After receiving her diploma, Kathy got the first job in her life. She was taken in the local city school, also in the prestigious language gymnasium. And the salary offered such a young girl could not dream of. Kathy plunged headlong into her work. She liked everything and to teach, and answer the numerous questions of her kids, and write notes for lessons, and deal with interesting and difficult cases for the pedagogical council. A young specialist was noticed and appreciated. It was nice to receive compliments from experienced colleagues. Kathy felt really happy. Christina, her sister, had also moved to the city by then. Graduated from the College of Economics. She got a job at a meat packing plant in the administrative office. Even got married, and very happily. James, the son of the director of the plant, fell in love with the pretty young employee. He was from a wealthy family, handsome, educated, witty. Perhaps his parents were at first against the bride's misbehavior from the village. But after recognizing her, they grew to love and accept her. Of course they did. Beautiful, hardworking, faithful, kind. The young lived in their own apartment, which had 3 spacious rooms and a huge loggia. This miracle was given to them at the wedding by James's parents. Kathy was sincerely happy for her sister. But her personal life was not going well. Back in her university days, Kathy had several failed romances. They all followed the same pattern. First, the girl became enchanted with the next suitor. She began to see him as an ideal man. Prepares in her mind for marriage. Then came the epiphany. Wearing heartache and almost disgust to the one who recently was the meaning of life, Kathy. For some reason, Her beau turned out to be infantile and spoiled creatures and egoists, not independent weak. No, with such Kathy could not connect her life. Bitterness, disappointment after each breakup remained for a long time. That's why Kathy decided to take a break. Well, these men, they're just frustrating. It's better to get down to work on her career. And then, one day in the life of a young teacher appeared he, Andrew, a modest, even a little stiff and short guy with blue eyes and a nice smile. For the first time, they sought each other in the school gym. On the eve of September 1, Andrew was leading a team of craftsmen who were hurriedly finishing the school renovation. The young men met their eyes. Kathy immediately realized that this man hooked her something. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. He was not so handsome, quiet, and unremarkable. And he flared to the roots of his hair at the sight of Kathy and turned away, embarrassed. It looked very sweet and touching. Kathy realized that he liked him too, at first sight. Then Kathy met Andrew every day, and he invariably hid his eyes from her. But the girl began to notice that the guy secretly looks at her when he thinks that she does not see it. And it was very pleasant and exciting. And one day, Andrew suddenly gathered courage. It was already on the eve of the handover. One last chance to get to know each other. Job done. Andrew has nothing more to do at the school, so he'd never see Kathy again. So the boy decided to take a desperate and difficult step. Andrew spoke quietly and just no florid phrases, but his speech was so sincere, so touching. Kathy, of course, melted and agreed to go out with the guy. Andrew did not even realize that she had been waiting for this invitation for a long time and was beginning to worry that she would never get it. And what to do then? She wasn't going to hang herself around his neck. Andrew invited Kathy to the movies. The girl was not worried before the first date. She could see that she really liked Andrew. She felt warmth coming from him and therefore was sure that their meeting would go as it should. If only Andrew would relax a little. He's very shy. After that first date, Kathy realized that Andrew was completely her person. They were so good, so easy together. Both told each other about their lives and destinies. Andrew was raised by his grandmother. His parents died when the boy was only 6 years old. So there he was left with his paternal grandmother, who was already a very old woman. She was an old-school lady and believed that children should be brought up in strictness, especially boys. So Andrew's childhood could not be called happy, warm, and carefree. No, the boy didn't complain. He just told me how he grew up. This is Kathy, sensitive and attentive Kathy. She drew her own conclusions. She felt sorry for this wonderful boy. She wanted to hug him, kiss him, to give him some warmth and care. I mean, that's all he needed. When Andrew was a kid, he went into the army after school. Then he came back, trained as a welder. But he didn't get a job in his profession. But he became a foreman. Repair crews are also bread and butter. Still, the boy never gave up hope of becoming a welder. And the wages are better there. And he'd studied so much for a reason. Andrew lived in a rented apartment, just like Kathy, when he was just a kid. Clever relatives had sold the parents' house, the boy's orphanage. There was no end in sight, so the boy had to start from scratch. But he was not discouraged and did not complain about life, although fate treated him rather unfairly. Andrew was very kind and caring, unlike Kathy's previous beau. He always wondered if she was hungry, and on chilly evenings he threw his jacket over her shoulders to keep her warm with Andrew. The girl felt loved and desired. He seemed to be willing to do anything for her. It was a wonderful feeling. Kathy realized that she had fallen in love, and the feeling was completely mutual. There wasn't even any doubt. Andrew looked at her with such eyes and tried so hard to do everything to make her feel good around him. It was impossible not to notice. Kathy was not surprised when Andrew proposed to her. And of course, she had happily accepted right away. She had wanted to live next to Andrew for a long time. In one apartment, they would take care of each other, support each other, and it would be more fun together. Kathy was tired of returning to an empty, cold room. Christina was not at first delighted with her sister's choice. "You're young, you're pretty, you could easily find someone more wealthy." How many friends does my earring have? They're all handsome and sons of wealthy parents, and they're like cheese in butter. What about this Andrew? Nikolai is not yard, not work normal. But when she recognized Andrew, the best Christina changed her mind. You have a good one. Smiled her sister, shared her impressions with Kathy. Very kind and loves you very much. You'll do well together. You'll achieve everything. You can't miss out on a man like that. I'm so happy for you. Andrew and Kathy got married. They lived in his rented apartment and Kathy's golden years began. The young husband tried to help his wife with everything. He did a lot of things for her, and even as he had dreamed, he found a new job. He got a job as a welder at a construction site, took part-time jobs, did not refuse the opportunity to poke around, as he was going to get his own apartment. Andrew dreamed of buying a 3-room apartment in a prestigious neighborhood where there are a lot of good schools and playgrounds, so that his and Kathy's future children had a happy childhood. Andrew often made surprises to his young wife. He would give her a ring for no reason, or just come home with a bouquet. Kathy felt the happiest in the world and thanked fate for sending her such a loving and caring husband. The young couple talked for hours and discussed movies and life stories, friends and relatives. They made plans. Sometimes they argued. Not without that, but they always came to a compromise in the end. They liked the same movies and books. They both discovered new and interesting things about each other. For example, with Andrew, Kathy got into hiking in the woods. Andrew, thanks to his young wife, loved the theater. Kathy was sure that she and Andrew were soulmates, halves of one whole. Even though the couple lived poorly, they had enough to live on. But both excesses like a luxury car or annual trips to the sea. There was no speech yet, but both were happy with what they had each other and often discussed that chance meeting at school, which might not have been. Take Kathy, a vacation in August, as her superiors had suggested to her. And then Alex was born. How did the young couple rejoice at his arrival? The new father was glowing with pride, taking his son Andrew in his arms for the first time. He turned out to be a wonderful parent, attentive, sensitive, caring. He could spend hours after work driving around with the stroller to give his young wife a break. But Kathy most often went for a walk with her husband. It was so pleasant to walk together with Andrew, holding the handle of the stroller and in a low voice, so as not to wake up his son, to talk to the man you love about everything in the world. The young parents liked to make plans for the future of their apartment. They still didn't have one. But the amount in the bank account was slowly but surely growing. Just a little bit more, and the couple will be able to afford to buy their own home from Christina's sister Kathy. At the same time, their daughter Helen was born. Young moms often went to visit each other and together learned the wisdom of caring for babies. The sisters shared advice, discussed the successes and failures of their babies. Kathy felt truly happy, and her husband is so loving and understanding. And her sister is close by. The young couple often dreamed about how their son would grow up. Surely he will be smart, kind, brave, will become, perhaps, a scientist or a master of all hands. And they and parents will try to ensure that the innate talents of their child to open and gain strength. It is only necessary to be attentive and patient. Andrew planned to study a lot with his son, to support him and always be there for him in a difficult moment. Kathy was glad that it was easy and calm at heart. The two of them and cope, raise a child a good man. But the dreams of the couple were not destined to come true. A few years after the birth of their son, misfortunes one after another fell on their small family. First came the financial crisis, as a result of which the couple's savings depreciated. They were only a few days away from buying their own apartment. The goal was so close. But after what had happened, the money accumulated in their account could only buy a couple of winter jackets. And that's if you're very lucky. Alex was already in daycare. Kathy was out of maternity leave. The couple took it hard. They even cried. I don't know what to say. Andrew couldn't help but cry. He thought his wife couldn't see, but she saw everything. The man even looked for an apartment he'd been dreaming of for a long time. Spacious, 3-room, not far from a large school and the Palace of Sports, where Alex could do swimming. And then such a blow. But there was no time to indulge in despondency for a long time. Hard times came. Salaries at Kathy's school began to be delayed for months. Things weren't going too well on the building site either. Andrew's main income now came from coven members. The man spent days working part-time jobs to feed his family. Time passed. Alex was growing up. It was time for him to go to first grade. The family seemed to adapt to the new conditions. Andrew was allowed to stay afloat. The man again made plans for his own apartment. There were hopes for a better life. A happy future loomed ahead. And then tragedy struck at the construction site. Andrew was working unofficially. The owners of the facilities saved money on everything and didn't care much about safety. Andrew knew he was taking a risk, but he was always careful and acted as carefully as possible. But this time, on the construction of a supermarket building, the man fell off from the height of the third floor right onto the concrete blocks piled piles and below. Of course, Andrew did not survive. Arriving in an ambulance, doctors had only to state the man's death. Kathy was not told the terrible news until the morning. For her, the whole world turned upside down in that second. She could not even cry for a long time. The woman felt her soul and heart literally torn in half. She didn't want to live. How and why get up in the morning if there is now no nearest and dearest person? Kathy realized that she would never meet someone like Andrew again. There was no one else like him, and she didn't need anyone else. She missed his smile, his look, the smell of warmth. It was physically painful to not be able to hug a loved one. There were his things around him: clothes, books, glasses. But Andrew himself would never come home again, would never hug her and her son, would never joke with them. How to accept that? To dull the pain, Kathy even took up the bottle. Kathy realized, of course, that this was a road to nowhere. But at that moment, she didn't care, just as long as she could get rid of the unbearable pain for a moment. There's no telling what would have happened to the woman if it hadn't been for Christina. She took Alex in for a while. She saw that his mother was not able not only to look after the child, but could not even cope with herself. Kathy didn't care. She took Alex, and that was fine. And she didn't even think about her own child's feelings at that time. But he was also in pain and scared. Strange as it may seem, Alex's illness brought Kathy back to life. He caught pneumonia and went to the hospital. Christina came to her sister in tears to tell her what had happened. She felt guilty. She hadn't looked after her nephew. He had a high fever and was delirious. The doctor and I thought it was stress at first. After all, the father's dead and the mother's in a state of confusion. But then it became obvious it was more serious than that. He was in intensive care for 24 hours. He seems better now, but the doctor says it's too early to relax. And your drinking, it's a threshold to get back into life. You can't go back. Now we're going to lose another boy. This situation brought Kathy back to life. She was more scared for her son than she'd ever been in her life. She pulled herself together, stopped drinking. She got her job back. And of course, she became a caring and loving mother again. Every day, Kathy went to visit her son in the hospital. At first, she stood under the windows, and then, when Alex was allowed to go out, she walked with him for hours on the hospital yard. Alex grew up immediately. Trouble had turned a 7-year-old boy into a little old man with sad eyes. He was surprisingly thin, pale, and silent. Looking at her son, Kathy realized that he was under deep stress. Her baby is traumatized. He needs a strong mother. And she, Kathy, took risks to remove, drowned in her own grief, forgetting about the native man, so much in need of her support. Kathy has been the perfect mother ever since. Attentive, totally focused on her son, caring. In the city, Kathy couldn't hold on. It was too expensive to rent an apartment. The woman didn't make that much money. She had to return to the village. Father was already gone, and his life was taken away by a heart attack 2 years earlier. And my elderly mother was in great need of support and care. It was already hard for her to cope with the household on her own. So Kathy's move came very well. Alex went to the first grade of the village school. Kathy got a job there as a teacher, but soon she had to think about changing jobs. The salaries in that school were very different from the salaries. In the city gymnasium on such crumbs was simply could not live, and Kathy had to pull the child alone on his feet, to put him on his feet. And then a neighbor, Aunt Nura, offered a good auction. Her nephew had a point at the central market in the city. He sold clothes and shoes and accessories. He needed a salesman, someone decent, someone he could trust, a salary. Aunt Tirin, the nephew, promised a good one. He also offered a percentage of the proceeds. 2 by 2, Kathy was also quite satisfactory. It was hard, of course, to part with the dream job. After all, teaching kids is Kathy's true calling. The woman knew from childhood what she wanted to be. But what can you do when times are so hard? They've got to eat something with Alex. What wouldn't you do for a child? With great regret, Kathy left school. She missed her students, her coworkers, and her school life for a long time. Her heart sank every time she saw uniformed children on the street. But Kathy was facing new realities. Working the market was hard. Capricious customers who themselves do not know what they want, scandalous traders. Competitors, heavy financial responsibility. And the road took a lot of time and effort. All the same, in the days when Kathy went to work, she had to get up neither light nor dawn and walk almost 2 kilometers to the nearest stop, through which the bus to the city. But the paycheck was good. Now Kathy could buy her son and beautiful clothes and toys. And even to the sea, they flew to the resort every summer. And her mother helped to look after her son. She was already, of course, very old. But she had enough time and energy for her grandson. Kathy often went to visit Christina. She did not work, was busy with the house and her daughter could afford. Her husband earned enough to provide for the family. Christina often felt sorry for her sister. How did your fate turn out? You work like a horse, spinning as hard as you can. I even feel awkward about being a housewife, and you. Everyone has his own fate, sighs Kathy. I'm not complaining about mine. We all have something for nothing. Kathy was genuinely happy about Christina's life. She adored both her sister and her niece Helen Christina, but her daughter. The 4 of them often went out together. They'd go out together. All in all, they lived close together. It was Christina who advised Kathy to save some money and invested in shares of a large company. James says it's the right thing to do. We have a lot of money invested in those stocks ourselves. My husband's sure it'll be great in the end. And James is smart, he knows. Kathy listened to her sister, and without saying a word to anyone, she bought a few shares. The capital grew, but it was impossible to get rich very slowly thanks to such interest, as it seemed at first. But Kathy decided to let the money lie on deposit. But she did not tell her son or her mother about the shares. I don't think they'll approve. They'll say it's all a waste of money. Let the family live in peace. So Kathy had her own little secret. Now she was saving money, buying stocks, saving for a happy future for her son. Alex grew up a smart, athletic boy, unlike his modest, quiet father. Alex was the soul of the company. He always had a lot of friends, comrades. The guy walked a lot, laughed, socialized. He was a very cheerful and carefree person. Kathy, looking at her son, was happy to see what kind of a guy grew up. Confident, brave, smart. This was exactly the kind of son she and Andrew imagined when they walked around the neighborhood with a stroller. Alex dreamed of becoming a lawyer, but to enter the cherished faculty he lacked just a little. The guy had to go to the army. Returning, he decided to try his luck in the city. His mother supported her son's decision and even helped financially. She rented Alex an apartment. Go, try, dare. Just be careful and know that no matter what happens, you can always come home to this house. Thank you, Alex smiled. But I'm not going back. I'm going to make my way in the city. There are so many opportunities there, so many prospects that something will work out. Goodbye, smiled Kathy. It was scary to let her son go, but what can you do? The boy had grown up. It was time for him to start his own life. Alex enrolled in a construction college and at the same time got a job at a factory. He studied, worked, and paid for his own apartment. He often came to the village to visit his mother and grandmother. He always showed up with gifts and funny stories. Kathy's mother had completely given up. She hardly ever left the house, and sometimes she didn't even recognize her own daughters. One day she had a heart attack. Kathy called an ambulance. Mom was taken to the hospital. The old woman never came back. What do you want age? The doctor sighed tiredly. No one is eternal. Kathy and Christina organized a funeral in the village. A lot of people gathered for the wake. After all, everyone here knew Mom. Then Christina told her sister to take over her parents' house. I don't need that half of the inheritance. I don't need it. You know I don't. What about you? You took care of your mom the last few years. That's hard work. So it's only fair that you get the house. Kathy didn't mind. She really needed her own place. Old age was fast approaching. The woman was sometimes surprised at how quickly her life flew by. It seemed that she and Andrew Alex had just been born. They were young, full of plans and hopes, beautiful. And now Alex is a grown-up, independent man. Andrew is not, and she herself is almost an old woman, that ahead only pension and quiet, peaceful existence in a village house. The only hope is in Alex. Here he will get married. His grandchildren will be born. The kids will come to visit their grandmother. Then the joy in life will appear. By the way, Alex is a good man. He did not give up his dream of law school. He got in after all. It was hard for him to work and study, but he'll get through it. Kathy, if anything, will help and support him. Christina said it was time to live for himself. You're young, you're still beautiful. Alex has grown up. Now you can treat yourself. Your salary is not bad. You even have savings. Let's fly to Italy or Greece. You've never been abroad. We'll take a walk there and have a vacation. What, Greece? What, Italy? Kathy smiled back. I have a grown-up son, Ivan, will soon get married. Probably he will need to help with the wedding and the apartment. That's what I'm saving up for. I don't have time for a vacation. Your son is a healthy, grown-up man. He's so strong and handsome. He'll manage on his own. You have to think about yourself sometimes. But Kathy didn't agree with her sister. She likes to talk easily in front of her husband like that. And Kalenka was born with a golden spoon in her mouth. She has a future for 100 years ahead planned and secured. True, the nephew was good, despite the rich parents, and grew up wise, modest, judicious. Simple, such a natural, pleasant, very independent too. Like Alex, she's been working since she was young. Golden girl. When Kathy had argued with her sister that Alex would need her support for the foreseeable future, she'd been right on the money. Shortly after that conversation, the son came to visit his mother for the weekend. He was mysterious, not as he always was. Kathy immediately realized that something was wrong. The woman quickly set the table and put out her son's favorite treats: fried potatoes with mushrooms, pancakes, and pickles from the cellar, and then watched with pleasure as Alex absorbed it all to satiety. The young man shared with his parents an amazing news: Mom, I'm getting married. As Kathy splashed her hands, went on, the calm questions fell from her like from a cornucopia. The woman is filled with a mass of emotions: joy, of anxiety, surprise. Her name is Julia. You're gonna love her. I'm bringing her here next weekend. You two should get to know each other before we get married. Just wanted to warn you first. Kathy nodded her head with a smile. She knew, of course, that this moment would come sooner or later, but still found herself caught off guard by the news. But wow, Alex is getting married, all grown up. Julia worked as a waitress in a cafe. The guy often came to eat at this place. That's how they met. Julia's from the country too. The son shared details. She was raised by a single mother too. See how much we have in common. Julia came to the city to go to law school. Another amazing coincidence. She dreamed of working for the police, helping to catch criminals, but she's so frail, so thin. What kind of policeman would she be? Julia didn't make it. She failed her college exams, but the girl did not want to return home to the village. What would she do there? She grew up in a small, remote village in a poor family. Her mother had 5 younger children besides her. Julia didn't want to go back to her old life, so she got a job as a waitress in a cafe. She rented a room in a dormitory and lived on her own, working slowly. How long have you two been together? 6 months almost made Alex smile. From that smile, Kathy realized that her son was head over heels in love. She's nice. takes care of me. She cleans the house, she cooks. I mean, we've been living together for 4 months in my rented apartment. I proposed to her the other day. That's how Kathy got through. It's how much to prepare and the dining room for the wedding to order and outfits for the bride and groom to find and host, hire and menu. Think through and the invitation to send out to moms. We decided that we can do without all that. Just answered Alex. We'll sign everything quietly in the registry office and everything as you want, nodded Kathy. She had painted in her head the image of a perfect wedding for her only son a long time ago. It was a cheerful celebration with a crowd of dressed-up guests, a ringing toastmaster, a huge cake, and a table full of treats. Cars decorated with balloons and ribbons, dancing, a beautiful bride, and a happy groom. But since the young people decided differently, so be it. It's their holiday after all. The following weekend, Alex arrived at his mother's house with his bride. Kathy was confused, prepared a royal chair, and made salads and meat, spared from the appetizers, stacked on the compost. Kathy was very excited. She wanted to please her future daughter-in-law, to show Julia that she was very much expected in this house. They were preparing for the arrival of the dear guest, as long as not to say the wrong thing, so that Alex was ashamed of her mother. Then it didn't happen. Julia turned out to be a thin girl and not tall. Big dark eyes, thin eyebrows, and a spread of thick silk. She was dressed simply but tastefully, an elegant dress, low-heeled shoes. At first, the guests and the hostess felt a little constrained. Julia, looking around carefully, was silent. Apparently, she was embarrassed to say a word. Only after a while did Kathy realize that this modesty was feigned. Julia was just looking around. She was choosing tactics of behavior, drawing conclusions. The atmosphere at the table was moving. Alex joked, amused his ladies, throwing up interesting topics for conversation. He was always so lively, energetic, companionable. In the course of the conversation, it became clear that Julia was indeed from a very poor and disadvantaged family. The girl charmed Kathy at the first meeting with her modesty. Bride Alex had a very sweet smile, and how she looked at her fiancé. In her eyes shone tenderness and love. The guy, however, answered Julia in the same way. He held her hand, now and then took her by the waist. There was love and harmony between the young people. Kathy looked at them and her heart rejoiced. Alex and Julia were married. Kathy suggested the young people to have a party in a cafe. All right, not a real wedding with a toastmaster and cars, but they could have a proper celebration with their friends. She even set aside money for it. Kathy had savings. Over the years, the woman managed to put aside a certain amount, plus stocks bought on her sister's advice. They'd grown a lot. At first, Kathy dreamed of buying an apartment in the city, but then realized that in the village she lives well. Quiet, calm people, familiar and friendly around. Kathy liked the very atmosphere reigning in her village. Closer to retirement, the woman realized that she did not want to move anywhere, but she could. She had enough money for a small apartment. But never mind, her son could still use it. Only Christina's sister knew about the savings. Kathy didn't talk about her wealth, not even to her son. She wanted Alex to grow up independent, that he as a man, himself tried to earn money for housing and something to achieve in life. But it will not work out. His mother will always help him in a difficult situation. There are means only for the time being. He shouldn't know that. Let him make his own way. The money was in a bank account. Kathy had invested some of it in stocks a few years ago on the advice of her sister's husband, and the money was now generating a good income. For her son's wedding, Kathy had withdrawn from the account. The amount she had estimated would be enough for a lavish celebration. She wanted to give them a present. On her son's next visit, she handed Alex a puffy envelope. Wow, he was amazed. He poked his nose inside. What a surprise. Where'd you get it? I saved up, Kathy smiled. Make yourself a holiday like you want to go out to a restaurant with your friends. Don't deny yourself anything, have fun. Thank you, smiled Alex. But we better save this money for renting an apartment. Why do you need to rent an apartment and already earn money? And the wedding, it is in general once in a lifetime, only happens. Well, ideally, of course. I have problems with my job, Alex admitted. They pay pennies, and it's unstable there. I'm just in danger of getting sick. And Julia, that she does not earn enough. A waitress does not pay millions. It's okay. Kathy patted his grown son on the shoulder. Alex is all grown up. He's a big man himself, and his problems are just as grown up. Already financial issues sadden him. He's thinking about supporting his family. I feel sorry for him, of course. Yes, everyone goes through such things. Don't worry, son. When you finish your studies, you'll find a better job. You're my good boy. You're so smart and handsome. You'll be such an educated man. If you're such a man, they'll take you everywhere. They won't take you. Alex sighed even harder. I was expelled, as Kathy added. Why for truancy? Alex said quietly. Kathy was almost crying, son. In her dreams, she had already seen her son as a graduated lawyer, successful, competent, highly paid. And now, all of a sudden, it's news like this. Just like that. Alex looked at his mother with irritation. I had to work a lot, so I didn't get to classes. I had a lot of absences. I thought they'd come out. They didn't. So I got expelled. No big deal. Kathy pulled herself together. Alex needs a little encouragement now. You'll learn. Not the first and not the last. Yes, I do not want to finish studying. Alex got angry. I'm a grown man. I'm sitting in the pears, pants rubbing. It's funny. You have to earn money, not suffer with nonsense. Kathy did not argue with her son. Not in that. He was now in a state of nothing. Then she will change his mind. Education is necessary for a young man. Otherwise, you can't build a career. A woman is sure to convey this to her grown-up only child. Now it is necessary to support him, to calm him down, to encourage him. Well, if you don't want a wedding, do with this gift of mine. What do you wish? Nodded Kathy Alex. Thank you. Alex's mom smiled gratefully and happily. We could really use the money right now. We're happy to help. You're all grown up and practical. Others would be happy to spend money on a holiday. But you're thinking about the future? I have to, sighed Alex. The son left, and Kathy stayed home with a heavy heart. Alex was also worried now. He didn't finish his studies. No decent job, no place to live. Now he's getting married. If children will go, Alex will have to work at unskilled work from morning till night to provide for his family. And this is not the future Kathy dreamed of for her only child. He's a grown man, he'll figure it out. Calmed her sister Christina in the evening on the phone. What are you worried about? You've done everything I asked of you. It's up to him now. Maybe give him money for an apartment. I've consulted with anyone. It's easier. The young will at least pay for the rent. Let him pay. The older sister objected. Don't even think of mentioning that money now. They'll sit on their necks and weigh their legs down. But they'll try to climb up. Maybe they'll succeed. You can always give them the apartment. It's not time yet. You are right, Christina, are right completely, of course, grinned my sister. And you come to visit me. Tomorrow come to the movie with you, go to a cafe. Sit. You need to unwind. Again, Christina, you're right, smiled Kathy. What a blessing that she has such a sister. A close person who will always support and cheer up. Alex and Julia got married. The signing took place in the city registry office modestly and quietly. Kathy, Christina with Rudit, and two of Julia's girlfriends attended the ceremony. Then a small group of people modestly celebrated the events in a cafe. We sat only a little. We made a few toasts to the newlyweds, gave the newlyweds presents, and dispersed. Julia had to go on shift. Alex was waiting at work, too. Kathy stretched out disappointedly when she and her sister were alone. The women decided to do a little shopping. Come on, young people don't care now. Christina waved away carelessly. As long as they lived well. Did Alex live well with Julia? Kathy had no idea. The son tried not to talk to his mother about it. It was awkward for her to ask, to pry into the soul of an adult. The young people came to visit occasionally. Julia behaved politely, but coldly and aloofly. Kathy noted that the young couple seemed to have a good relationship. Alex's job was not going well. He changed places and employers, looking for a decent income, but nothing worked out. Alex didn't want to think about going back to university. Kathy several times wanted to tell her son that she had a safety cushion, which she was ready to give him. She wanted to encourage Alex to take that desperation out of his eyes. But the woman delayed. We need to let the young ones try to get back on their feet on their own. It's important. It's not like they're so needy right now. Yes, it's hard. But they're two adults who should be able to cope. But if there's a child, then it's a different matter. Children should live in normal conditions with calm, peaceful parents. Several years passed. The situation in my son's family did not change. He was still looking for a job. Alex, from a cheerful joker of a joker, turned into a frowning man. Kathy thought it was because of money problems. But one day she accidentally witnessed a conversation between her son and Julia. The couple came to visit Kathy Petrovna. Lately, it happened less and less often. The woman went to the kitchen to take out of the oven forbidden with apples goose. And when she returned with a tray in her hands, she managed to witness an ugly scene. "You're just a lowlife." Julia looked at Alex with dislike. "You can't do anything." Married Andrew. He gave her a cool phone for her birthday. And they're going on vacation to the Emery soon. And you can't even find money for a spa for the woman you love. We're about to be evicted from our apartment for non-payment. Alex silently lowered his head. He had nothing to object. Probably, the young man felt at this moment really full of nothing. Kathy's heart squeezed with pity for his son. Wow, Julia often humiliates him like this. Once when she was visiting, she couldn't help herself, and the son was too used to hanging his head. He wasn't even surprised and didn't even try to defend himself. Julia's a real piece of work. He's so modest and pretend at first. And herself. Kathy had a hard time pulling herself together. You can't show your true feelings about the situation. In fact, she must pretend she hadn't seen or heard anything. Her interference will only spoil everything. Julia will then have the opportunity to call Alex a little son. But of course, she's going to give her mother-in-law a run for her money. That's for sure. No, let them deal with it themselves. They're adults. For the rest of the evening before the young ones left, Kathy stayed neutral. Talked on distracted topics, smiled at both spouses, and tried not to notice the sunken sadness in her son's eyes. When the children left, many things became obvious to Kathy. Alex is head over heels in love with Julia. That much is clear. He's willing to go to great lengths for her. He tries, he fights, but he can't get anywhere. Largely because Alex never finished his studies, and he didn't finish his studies just because of Julia. The guy has to work hard to provide for his lover's needs. Kathy got herself back. You have to be objective. It was still Alex's choice to drop out of university and get a job. Yes, a lot of it was out of a desire to please Julia. But Alex made the decisive step himself. How to help his son now? Kathy thought again about the money in the account. Should she give it to Alex? Let him buy an apartment. Julia would be delighted. She approves. In serious matters, Kathy is used to consulting her sister. Jana called her. "You're crazy," Christina exclaimed after hearing her sister's reasoning. "Under no circumstances do not buy an apartment now. Don't you realize that it will be considered as jointly acquired property in marriage? They've only been together a week. What if they get a divorce? Julia would take half of it without blinking an eye. I understand if they had kids. Then at least the grandkids would get everything. And now it's going to someone else. You worked hard. You didn't earn money for this spinning your tail. Oh, it's hard being the mother of a grown son." Kathy sighed. She realized her sister was right again. So many nuances to keep in your head. It's not easy being a mother at all, her sister parried. But it's nice sometimes. A few more years passed. Kathy saw that her son was unhappily married. Alex was still looking for a decent living. He did all sorts of things, and Vaktang, and already worked, and tried to open a business, and worked as a trucker, but nowhere for a long time. What was going on? The company went bankrupt, or he didn't pass the medical examination. Finally, Alex gave up. Tired. It's hard to work and be disappointed. One day he came to his mother suddenly, unannounced, alone. "We are not pulling the life in the city," he sighed. "It's expensive for us. We'll come back for the first time with you. We'll live. You don't mind? No. Shook her head in surprise. That's good, nodded Alex. In that case, we'll come next week. Kathy was at a loss after her son's departure. Are they going to live together here in the village? What kind of a strange decision. There are no jobs here. What Alex and Julia are counting on. But the woman did not argue with her son. She saw that he's already having a hard time. All right, let them try. They are probably just looking for a way out of a difficult situation. They're also considering a life in the countryside. Well, we can do that, since the city didn't work out. Life together with Alex and Julia began with the division of territory. Mom, we will live in the living room, said Alex. Why? Kathy was surprised. She had prepared for the young corner of her bedroom. In her opinion, it was the most cozy room and remote. The young people would live more quietly there. Living room, Kathy liked to rest here watching TV, and the neighbors often dropped by. There was plenty of room in the living room for friends. Because it was the biggest and brightest room, Alex answered simply. Then Kathy realized that her son was broadcasting Julia's will. He always tried to please his wife in everything. He loved his young wife more than his father's life and took advantage of it. Julia immediately showed her true face to her mother-in-law. Did not even try to pretend anymore, polite or modest. She didn't like everything Kathy did. And her mother-in-law didn't cook right. Too fatty, unhealthy. And the server's table was sluggish, wrong. And she didn't even know how to mop the floors. Julia would often admonish Kathy with a look of contempt. That it's you who rattles the dishes in the morning and disturbs your sleep, or are your friends laughing too loud? Couldn't you get together somewhere else in the evening? At first, Kathy was at a loss for words at her sister-in-law's insolence. Then, of course, she thought of appropriate responses to Julia's barbs. She wanted so much to remind her that she was not in her own house. Accordingly, she should behave more modestly. But Kathy lingered. For her son's sake, of course. The woman saw. Alex is very attached to Julia. He loves her, idolizes her. The young husband tried to fulfill his wife's every whim. There were many whims. The man failed and felt guilty. Julia was suspicious of elegy, this feeling of guilt. Often she mentioned husbands, boyfriends, her acquaintances who overpowered the women they loved with jewelry and literally overwhelmed them with money. Kathy understood the purpose of what was being said. Julia was manipulating Alex, played on his feelings, used her spouse to suppress him. But she wasn't even trying to open up to her son. He's not in the right state of mind right now anyway, too blinded by love and passion. Kathy sincerely did not understand what her son found in this Julia. Well, yes, she was pretty, but there's a lot of them out there, and now you're getting these feelings. It seemed that if Julia asked him to jump off a cliff, he would do it gladly. Alex got a job at the local sawmill. The work was hard, physically exhausting, but the pay was good, enough to take Julia into town from time to time, then to shopping, then to a restaurant. The young wife herself didn't bother to work. Well, where can I find a suitable place here in the village? She sighed. And in the city, every day do not go to the city. I traveled, Kathy suddenly remembered. I had no husband, no child to raise. So I drove from here to the central market every day. Why are you comparing times and situations? Julia sighed languidly. First of all, I am married, fortunately. After all, the responsibility for the material maintenance of the family lies on the man, not on the woman. Secondly, we are in no hurry to have children. I believe that it is silly to give birth to Beskov without a yard is terribly irresponsible. And thirdly, I'm going through such a period now. Do you think it's easy to work as a waitress on night shifts? To tolerate the antics of customers? I need to recuperate, get back to my old self. Kathy could have said a lot of things to her daughter-in-law, but she kept quiet. She kept quiet for her son's sake. He was having a hard enough time as it was. And now he's going to be caught between his mother and his wife, like between two fires. Kathy was well aware that her daughter-in-law was openly condemning her life. And this Julia to give birth to children without a stake, without a yard is irresponsible. I mean, that's a stone to her head. When did she and Andrew have Alex? The Young family didn't have their own place yet. That's what the daughter-in-law was implying. The longer the Young lived at Kathy's, the clearer the woman realized Julia manipulates Alex, makes him dance to his own tune, uses the spouse. The son is the one who is in love with the young beauty, put on the other in front of his eyes and left the spouse. Turns this situation in his favor. Julia herself clearly does not nourish a colleague any tender feelings. This is evident from her irritation, her dislike of the other look at the spouse. According to gestures, yes, a lot of them, these indicators, and how only the son does not notice. So why is Julia still with Alex? The answer is simple. Who else would work so hard for her? Where else would she find someone so loyal and obedient? Such a feeling as Alex has for Julia is rare, and the girl understands it perfectly well. She will try to make the most of the situation. And if suddenly there will be a more interesting option, she will easily leave Alex. Being confident in her own power, Julia behaved rudely with her mother-in-law right in front of Alex. The daughter-in-law must have realized that Kathy could see right through her. It was infuriatingly annoying and frightening, apparently. And how did Julia look at her mother-in-law? She felt superfluous in her own house, arrogant, full of contempt. Looks, shelves, remarks, reproaches. To have less contact with her daughter-in-law. Kathy now went to visit her neighbor herself. She also often traveled to her sister's house and even stayed overnight. Christina, of course, advised to put the initial Julia in her place. It's your house, after all, shook her sister's head. Remind her of that. Let them think about it now. Tell them you were separating. You were looking for a place to live. Otherwise, she's living on her own, and she's got a lot of nerve. I'll talk to her myself, if you're uncomfortable. No. Kathy waved his hands. No way. Alex is always on her side. It's hard enough for him. He didn't need to add to his frustration. Alex really did blindly believe everything his wife said. Kathy tried to be as polite as possible. I kept silent in response to her nibs, remarks. My sister-in-law uncomplainingly cleaned her plates, tolerated her reproaches. But Julia, apparently, still complained to her husband about his mother, put in an unsightly light. Mom, why are you picking on her? Sometimes the son would start a conversation. Julia is a wonderful woman, I love her. You mustn't think of her as an enemy. Try to make up with her. I didn't have a fight with her, Kathy tried to justify it. I'm trying not to talk to her at all. Any conversation turns in her direction, and she makes me her number one enemy. That's what it's all about. Alex shook his head sadly. Julia says, so you despise her, or do not notice, or come to reproach. The third is not given. Why do you make her work in the kitchen? Julia was going through a rough patch. She needed a vacation. So I just reminded her to clean up her plate. No one's making her work. I serve you myself. Alex looked at his mother with a sad look. And Kathy realized that everything is useless. He still will not believe that his wonderful Julia systematically turns the life of her husband and mother-in-law into a nightmare. Maybe he'll get to Alex someday, but not now. Julia masterfully turned Alex against his own mother, against the person who sheltered the couple in her house, gave them shelter, who, in fact, feeds them. Since Alex earns pennies at the sawmill, and the lion's share of his salary goes to pay off loans. In the city, the couple had managed to rack up loans that they now had to pay off. It was frustrating and painful. Kathy saw no way out of the situation. She only hoped that Alex would sooner or later see the light. Sometimes she wanted to kick the insolent youth out of the house, but that would mean losing her son forever. Julia manages to turn Alex against his mother on the spot. And here, if she throws them out of the house at a difficult moment. There's a lot of drama to be had here. Shakespeare would be jealous. And this house, to be honest, belonged to Alex when her mother died. Kathy suddenly realized that such things usually happen suddenly. Yes, Mom was sick. She needed help, but there was no sign of her leaving so soon. Kathy thought about it a lot, because she might one day be gone just as suddenly. And then how would Alex be left with? The inheritance was 6 months away. Suddenly, some other claimants for this house will show up unexpectedly and heirs. My father had a complicated relationship with his relatives. Anything's possible. To protect Alex, Kathy, who was at that time the only owner of the house, wrote a gift deed to her son, and that was it. Her soul was at peace. Kathy was used to living for her only child. She did everything for him. Now the house officially belonged to Alex. And the son knew it was true. At the time, Alex thought he wouldn't need the inheritance. He planned to settle down in the city, buy a nice apartment, that he's some country house. Who knew it would turn out like this? Kathy decided to be patient. It cost her a lot of strength to keep her temper in check and not take it out on Julia. And it wasn't good for her health either. But for the sake of her son, she could bear it as long as Alex was happy. If not for Christina and her sensible advice, Kathy would have spent all her savings on an apartment in the city for young people. But her sister was right. The woman understood that now more than ever, Julia doesn't like Alex. It's obvious. She's using him. If Alex buys an apartment, which will be considered jointly acquired property, the young spouse will immediately demand a divorce, and she will legally take half of the housing with her into her new life. And this is very good money. Well, no, we'll not wait, Julianka. Alex won't be blinded by this strange love for ages. Someday he'll see the light. That's when he'll need an apartment in the city for his new life. Too bad he can't get out of the house for free. Kathy had to put up with the antics and unfair reproaches of his sister-in-law. There was no end to it, but the woman understood. Now she's in no position to change anything. Christina, seeing that her sister was having a hard time, suggested we go on vacation together. Why don't we dispel all Kathy's phone calls and go sunbathing? We'll swim in the sea. We'll go on excursions. They'll be great. Go for it. In the end, Kathy gave in. She really needed a break from everything that was going on at home. Young people, let them live in the village house. Julia would have to cook and clean. They've spoiled her. Doesn't even help with the plate. She sits at home all day and the phone hangs out and watches soap operas. Julia, of course, expressed her opinion about Kathy's vacation. There is no money in the family, and some people go to resorts. She replied, somehow to Alex's remark that his salary has been cut again. But here even the man who had angelic patience and in love with his wife could not stand it. Julia, what do you care? Mom earned it, she has the right. What about us? We have never been anywhere with you, and we'll make money. I promise. Kathy hid in her room without saying anything. She didn't have time to get into an argument with her sister-in-law. Things don't pack themselves. It had been a wonderful trip. Kathy and Christina rented a house in a small village by the Black Sea. The sisters walked a lot, swam in the warm waves, sunbathed, went on all sorts of excursions. Kathy once took a risk and realized an old dream, took a ride on a hydrocycle with a young and reckless driver. The spray in the face, the dizzying speed of the endless sea surface. So scary and so much fun. It's never been at the same time. What's their sea and excursions? The sisters even went to discos at night and danced as in their youth. Do not despair. Thank you, Christina, for pulling me out. Sincerely enjoyed, Kathy. I feel like I'm 10 years younger. By the way, that's exactly what it looks like. Christina smiled. You look better, more rested. You look great. And so it was. For the first time in years, Kathy liked herself in the mirror. She had a fresher glow. And most importantly, there was a sparkle in her eyes and life and energy in her face. Kathy felt that she had left behind all the problems and the cranky, demanding daughter-in-law, and the unsettled son, and the endless squabbles in the kitchen. There was a powerful reset. The woman felt strong, beautiful, and energetic. The world seemed bright and welcoming. Only good things were thought of. One day, the sisters came late and admired for a long time unusually large stars and bright yellow moon, which left a clear path on the sea surface. Beauty stretched out Kathy. It certainly was, agreed Christina. It's a shame, only to go back tomorrow. I can't believe it. I love it here so much. Another life, another world. It's back to the same old thing. It's driving them away. Christina couldn't take it anymore. Sitting on your neck and getting hard. She's sad. She'll wait for me. I'll come and clean up your mess. Don't. The Ataman protested. It will make things worse. There's no need to make things worse, grumbled Christina. There's nowhere else to go. Good evening, lovely ladies. A low, pleasant voice came from behind them. Both women shuddered with surprise and turned around. In front of them stood a man, slim, trim, with elegant gray hair on his temples. He was charming and had a very friendly smile. He was wearing jeans that went up to his knees and a loose black t-shirt. In all this, the stranger looked very stylish and attractive. And hello to you too, answered for the two of them Christina. Wonderful evening, isn't it? The man kept approaching. Kathy could not take her eyes off his smile. It made the stranger's face seem to glow. The man introduced himself as William, said he had just arrived here today, and checked into a room on the second floor of his sister's cafe. Just today, they were having dinner in this place, drinking wine, eating kebab, enjoying live music. William immediately noticed two beautiful, single ladies at the table and followed them to the shore. I apologize if I startled you. And don't think I'm a frivolous adventurer. It's just that you both have such kind smiles. I just wanted to get to know you better. I'm here all by myself. I'd like to find some company for socializing. If you don't mind. There's a problem with that. It's Christina's fault, she shrugged. I mean, we're leaving on a plane tomorrow at lunch. That's a shame. The smile slipped off William's face for a moment. Kathy was also sorry they wouldn't have the chance to get to know the man better. Surely it would have been even more fun and exciting for the three of them to spend their vacation together. There was something about William, something special. Kathy wanted to be near him, to look into his eyes, to admire the man's smile, to listen to him. Strange, the woman didn't remember anything like that happening to her in the last 30 years. And had it ever happened in her life at all? Well, if that's the case, we have one night left. William was smiling again. So let's make it a fun night to remember. I come here a lot. I'll show you places to see. You're coming with me. Kathy was ready to say yes right away, but Christina's careful. Christina, unlike her sister, didn't lose her head around the charming stranger. It's like we're seeing you for the first time, she smiled embarrassedly. I don't want to offend you, but it's right to slap yourself on the forehead. William. Of course, there are all sorts of lunatics and criminals nowadays. Of course you're wary, and so am I. Let's just walk along the promenade then. There's a lot of people here. I don't want to part with you. That's the way to humor Christina. Kathy realized her sister was pleased that William was not offended. It was a wonderful walk. The sisters and their new acquaintance chatted and laughed without ceasing. Turns out William lives in New York and has his own business there, a chain of restaurants in the States. He's often there on business, meeting with winemakers, making contracts, shopping. Basically, he's growing the business. The man also told about his personal life, sincerely, without any secrets. He acted as if he had known Christina and Kathy for 100 years. William was widowed early. His daughter was only 9 years old at the time, and he never remarried because his daughter didn't want a stepmother living in the house. And the word of an only child was always law to William. You and Kathy are alike in that, Christina remarked. She too lives only with her son, tolerates a lot for his sake, allows him everything. Yes, William looked at Kathy with interest. The woman's eyes met his, and she flashed like a young woman. She even felt hot. That's a shame. Years later, I realized that's not the way to do it. My daughter grew up to be quite a spoiled brat, but she's doing well now. She found a husband who, like me, tolerates her whims and fancies, and lives quietly abroad, unfortunately. They've gone to a warm place, so I'm all alone. I have a job, friends, but still, after my daughter's departure, I feel empty in the house and in my soul. The trio partied until the wee hours of the morning, and it seemed as if they'd gone back to their youth. William clearly sympathized with Kathy. He tried to please her from time to time, taking her hand casually. Once he hugged her waist lightly and briefly. Kathy wanted that moment to last forever. The sisters reached their cottage only when the matchmaking began. William, of course, volunteered to see them off. I don't want to part with you, William confided. His eyes, of course, were on Kathy. Kathy, why do you blame the phones? Christina suddenly suggested. Why did we have such a good time? Why don't we come back again next year? We should call each other so we can have a vacation together. It'd be fun. That's obvious. That's a great idea. William says yes, I'm dictating my number. No, you better give me your phone number. Kathy complied with William's request with a smile. He deliberately held her hand in his as he took her cell phone. There was so much warmth from him, so much tenderness. Kathy wanted to dissolve into it all. It was a shame they had met so late. William quickly dialed his number from Kathy's cell phone. But there he smiled. Now we've exchanged phone numbers. We won't lose everything. Great, nodded Kathy. And she knew perfectly well that this phone exchange meant nothing. And the fairy tale that had almost begun would never really begin, because there was no tomorrow. Already today, she and anyone will fly home. And there again a cramped village house, a disgruntled daughter-in-law, a Willis son. And the problems hadn't gone anywhere. While she was away. William, today he's been out with them. Tomorrow he'll find someone else. A man like that, he's not for her. He's too handsome, successful, wonderful. Where would she go with someone like that? Sad, of course, but the truth of life. Ah, how he looked at you, smiled Christina, when the sisters were left alone. I wish someone would look at me with admiration someday. Well, just once. Oh, come on. Kathy waved you off with a smile. She knew that now she would often remember William for his soft voice, his delightful manners, his beautiful eyes. And let that man forget about her, the very next day it didn't matter. William, he played a huge role in her life, although he himself did not even realize it. Kathy did not reach her home until the evening. She and Christina had managed to nap for a couple of hours before the flight, but Kathy still felt tired and broken. Sleepless night, flight, acclimatization. The door was unlocked. Alex must have forgotten to lock the gate when he got home from work. He's been tired lately. And then there was Julia, who knows what she was feeding her husband while she was away. It was hard to imagine a daughter-in-law cooking borscht for her husband. The windows in the house were open wide. The steady hum of the television came from inside. The evening news was on. Kathy was about to enter the house with a smile. When she heard Julia's voice, she was obviously in the kitchen. How? Very simple. I was telling off someone who was obviously Alex. Now will appear soon. We will send her for milk. And while she walks, we'll put her things out of the door. It's no big deal. We've agreed 100 times. What are you worried about? Isn't that too harsh? Asked in an uncertain voice Alex. She's my mother after all. And this is her house. Not hers, yours. Julia argued. You showed me the deed of gift. And if that's the case, why should I put up with her here? I mean, she's been harassing me on and on and on. Alex, I told you, she's trying to break us up. But let me leave then, because I can't live in a house with your mother anyway. Okay. Alex mumbled conciliatingly. As agreed, so we will act. You just look, don't give any slack. We do everything right, you know? Standing up for personal boundaries. We're good. Kathy was standing under the window, dead or alive. It slowly dawned on her that she just overheard him talking, and that she was about to be kicked out of the house, and that Alex had agreed to it. There was no way the older woman had expected such a thing. She even had dark flickers in front of her eyes. Her blood pressure must have skyrocketed. Kathy took a few deep breaths to pull herself together, let on a joyful look, and entered the native hay. Oh, hello, lusciously, Julia smiled. And we were waiting for you a little later. A cab was rushing by. I didn't have time to look back, Kathy. I brought you some presents. Oh, what an experience. No sharing. Julia was doing her best to feign some sort of joy at seeing you. Alex stood next to her, slumped and silent. And Kathy perfectly understood the reason for her son's sadness. Of course, it's not easy for him right now. But he can't put his wife in her place. She has too much influence on him. Oh, Kathy splashed Julia's hands. You go to Anna for fresh milk, please. I have soup boiling on the stove. I can't get away. Alex is very tired from work, and I'm sick. If you are not very tired, then of course, nodded Kathy, and left the house, already knowing what awaited her on her return. It was a good thing she had overheard the conversation. She would at least have time to prepare for a serious conversation with her son and his wife. Her suitcases. Kathy spotted the porch from afar. They stood orphaned, leaning against the wall, waiting for their hostess. The hope that Alex would stop his wife's insolent behavior melted like smoke. The woman went up on the porch, knocked on the door. There was a note from inside. Julia's voice sounded. "Read it, and you'll understand everything." "Goodbye. I don't need it." "I need your note," Kathy said. "I want to talk to you. I want to look you in the eye." The door swung open with a bang. Julia stood on the threshold. She looked haughtily at Kathy. "Well, look, if that's what you want." "Julia, why are you doing this to me?" "I've tried to be your friend." "Haven't I? You piss me off. A young woman has split. You're judgmental. Everything's wrong. Everything's wrong. You make your own rules. I don't feel like I own the place. And Alex is fawning over you." "Well, this is my home," gently reminded Kathy. "That's why it's natural for me to make my own rules." Julia exclaimed again. "Again you insinuate that we live in your house." "It's not your house, by the way. It's not yours, it's your son's. So you're the one living here. Then get out of here. You have a good pension, enough to rent. Thank you. You even packed my things," Kathy said calmly. And it took a lot of effort to stay calm. Crying. She will when she gets to Christina. Of course, she'll go to her sister's. Who else? Only there aren't many of them here. My stuff is just clothes. What about photo albums? Old books, letters? And this junk is heavy, sighed Christina. "We threw it out." Kathy gasped. It was as if she'd been punched in the solar plexus. It was her family's history, old photographs, letters from Andrew and her parents, postcards, diaries Christina and Kathy had kept when they were young. The first drawings by Helen and Alex. All of it carefully stored in boxes and folders, neatly arranged on shelves on a rack and in the bedroom. Really? Was there nothing left? Julia looked at her mother-in-law with defiance. "What is this habit of clinging to junk?" The insolent girl grinned. "What good are these dusty papers? It's even easier to breathe without them." Kathy, despite her condition, suddenly had a great idea. She even had to suppress a smile so as not to accidentally give herself away to Julia. Soon she would no longer feel like the mistress of the situation. In a couple of minutes, the expression of smugness would evaporate from her pretty face. "So you all threw everything out of my room." "Totally. It's gonna be our closet now. All the boxes, every single one of them." "Did you even look inside?" "Some of it was looked at, some of it was just thrown away." Why is Julia suddenly tense? Were there documents or what? The documents can be recovered in case of emergency. Kathy sank down tiredly on the porch steps. The blue shoebox was thrown away too. "Yeah, probably, but what's the big deal?" Kathy looked up at Julia. "The blue box was my savings for the apartment I was going to give Alex." The words had an incredible effect. Julia stunned pale. She opened and closed her mouth a couple times to say something, then powerlessly sank down on the steps next to Kathy. "Why didn't you warn me?" she almost whispered. Kathy was pleased with the effect of the phrase. She didn't keep the money in any blue shoebox. It was lying quietly in her account. But Julia had to teach her a lesson for all those naughty things, which she did to both her and Alex. "How did I know you'd decide to throw my stuff out of the house?" "I had no idea." The older woman stubbornly played the role of a confused and bewildered old lady. Julia shook her head as if she had woken up from a dream. Her eyes lit up with eagerness for action. "You will tell me everything in detail now. What the box looked like. What shade of blue, was it big or small?" Questions poured out of her sister-in-law like a cornucopia of questions. Kathy answered, trying not to get confused in her statement. The situation was beginning to get her down. Alex had stayed home all this time, never even poked his nose out on the porch. Probably he was ashamed of the fact that he had gone along with his wife and kicked his mother out of the house. But he couldn't go against his wife either. He loved her too much, which Julia took advantage of. After answering all Julia's questions, Kathy walked to the bus stop. "Come on, stay," he mumbled to his sister-in-law. She now needed her mother-in-law to help her in her search. The young woman was determined to find the box, even in a landfill, even at the end of the world. And Kathy could help her find it. She knew what a huge amount of money looked like. Why would she? Kathy was a little surprised. What do you mean? Why should we? Now we have to look for the box of money together. You do care about your savings. Is that what it is? Kathy smiled. That's where you're wrong. I don't care what happens to that money. I was going to give it to you anyway. If you find it, take it. Kathy walked down the street and felt Julia's eyes on her. Her sister-in-law was shocked that she had thrown away so much money with her own hands. Yes, but now she'll be digging her nose into the ground just to bring that wealth home. Greedy Julia doesn't realize that Kathy's money is in a bank account. Her mother-in-law is not so dumb as to keep such funds in a box. Before heading to the bus stop, Kathy stopped by Jenna's neighbor's house. She'd been friends with her mother once, good friends, but now she was gone, unfortunately. Kathy still had a good relationship with Jenna. She needed someone in the village, someone who would tell her what was going on, keep an eye on Julia. And Jenna was the perfect informant. The woman had been outraged at first, listening to Kathy's story. She couldn't get her head around it. How could she do such a thing to a man who had let his daughter-in-law and son into the house when they were in a difficult situation? And then, recognizing it all the way through, Jenna laughed loudly and merrily. But Tamar, you guys, you've got to rub her nose in it like that. You figured it out. I'd like to know how they're doing. Kathy smiled. How are they living? How's the search going? Something tells me this story will open Alex's eyes to his wife. Oh, Alex shook her head, Jenna. I didn't think he'd be so weak-willed. Love is evil, Kathy sighed. Jenna had hit a sore spot in her heart. Of course I'll keep an eye on them. I'll get my Petya on board too. You know how quick he is? Peter. Jenna's son just turned 14. The kid's been using his phone to shoot content for his channel. And Peter seemed to be getting good at it. When Kathy was done with her chores, she went to her sisters. Christina would not leave her, would listen to her, support her, pity her. It was good to have such a person. Since the evening of Kathy's return from the resort, it's been 2 weeks. It's not a long time really, but in that time, a lot had happened. First of all, Kathy's plan had worked. Julia was hooked. She found out where they take the garbage from their village. She found the dump and now she went there every day as if to work. The girl was not employed anywhere and had plenty of free time, and Julia's trips to the dump were regularly reported to Kathy by phone by Jenna. She proved to be an excellent contact. Oh, Aunt Kathy. What a circus. She goes to the bus stop first thing in the morning. She's like a tourist. She's got a huge rucksack on her shoulders, overalls, gloves, bags. Everything is serious. And in the evening, she comes back tired, shot, angry. She smells like a motherfucker. Animals scatter. People cringe. It's like a circus. Tales of Julia's adventures don't stop there. Peter, Jenna's son, sometimes followed Julia, rode with the boys on bikes to the dump, and filmed videos of the young woman stubbornly digging through mountains of garbage. Kathy watched these videos on Channel 5M. Julia scrupulously combed through the dump day after day without missing a square meter. It looked comical, of course. But Kathy was already feeling a little sorry for her almost ex-sister-in-law. Alex had filed for divorce. First, Kathy learned from the neighbors that Alex had left home. Then the son called his mother, apologized himself, repented, and at the same time informed her that he was divorcing Julia. She had turned her back after all, and him away with her obsession, money, boorishness, greed. We're getting a divorce, Mom, I can't stand her anymore. She must be crazy. Julia, let her stay at our house for a while. I gave her a week because she has nowhere to go. Julia keeps hoping to find money. It's become an obsession for her. She blames herself for not looking in the boxes I threw out. Eating on her own. She blames me too. It's unbearable. What are you going to do in the city? I finally found a good job with a place to live, which is important. But I'll have to travel a lot. But I don't care. But the money's good. After talking to my son, Kathy felt better. It is so important to be in touch with a loved one. Now between her and Alex, there are no conflicts and misunderstandings. And Alex's life seems to be getting better. He found a job from Julia, who used him openly, and is leaving. Maybe soon he will meet a good girl and will be happy in his personal life again. What are his years? Relationship with Julia will obviously be a good lesson for Alex. He won't fall into such a net again. At least Kathy really hopes so. The nicest thing happened in Kathy's life the day after she arrived at her sister's house. Christina, of course, had taken her in. They had a spare room in their apartment. Live as long as you like, Sis hugged Kathy. I'd be happy to move in forever. Kathy went to bed all upset. She still had no idea how she was going to live her life. In the morning, she got a call from William. The same casual acquaintance, so enchanted that the woman at the resort. He said that he couldn't forget their meeting, that he thought of Kathy all the time. Dreams of seeing her again. It was incredible. William. Kathy had never imagined that such a man would actually fall in love with her. But it seems that he did. William called and wrote often. They talked a lot, and gradually they became close, like relatives. Distant, yes. But still Kathy felt that this communication was necessary for both of them. William expressed a desire to come to Kathy, but she suggested another option more pleasant. Kathy would fly to him herself, because the atmosphere of a resort and a lush old country town are, as they say, two big differences. Kathy had the money for the trip that she had saved for her son's apartment. Alex, he earns his own money. Kathy has only one life, and one should enjoy every moment of it. The woman realized this when she retired, but better late than never. In general, Kathy was going on a long journey, went shopping with anyone, bought beautiful things, and felt really happy. True, she had one more thing to do before she left, not very pleasant, but urgent. A conversation with Julia. She'd had enough of being queen of the dump. Let her start a new life too,